Alrighty. LCE Ego Ardor Blossom Star Faust is a difficult unit to make use of. Aesthetically and thematically, she's bloody fantastic. She comes from my favorite Intervala. Me, the outfit is really cool, and while there isn't exactly ponytail, well, side tails are very, very high tier as well. All that said, her whole gimmick is to burn brights, burn out, and explode, giving out a bunch of benefits by doing so. Now, that's great and all. We're in the era of chain battles, so inevitably sinners may die, and that part is of little consequence. It's just that unfortunately, she doesn't give quite as much as we'd like upon death. Rather, there's an unfortunate amount of restrictions. On death, she applies 2 burn potency on enemies, and up to 3 more burn between enemies based on self-burn. She also grants +2 ego resources for 2 of the least owned ego resources. While far better than nothing on death, we could stand to gain more. If she dies due to using her enhanced S3, we instead inflict 3 burn on all enemies and inflict up to 5 burn between them based on self-burn. Likewise, she provides 2 ego resources of the 2 least owned, and grants free offense level to the substituting ally. Bit more like it, rather than a pitiful 5 burn and 4 ego resources, we at least get 8 burn, 4 ego resources, and free offense level out of it. While it's a step up, I still wish it would scale a good bit higher for her sacrifice. Anyhow, how does she even get her enhanced S3? She needs 30 self-burn, which needs a fair bit more micromanagement than you'd initially expect. S1 only grants a burn potency. While it can turbo it up as much as 11, it's no use if we lose it all afterwards anyway. Aside from that, inflicts quite a lot of burn potency and has self and enemy burn based conditionals. S2 at the very least gives us burn counts, but nothing in the way of potency. If we at least get one of these in, we can pretty much guarantee the build up towards an enhanced S3. Otherwise, it hits reasonably hard and clashes surprisingly well with its higher offensive level. It also has an unbreakable coin, and a bunch of self and enemy burn based conditionals. Base S3 grants us an immediate +7 burn and 1 count on combat starts. This 7 potency can actually take us up to the 30 needed before triggering her enhanced S3, since the skill checks before use as to whether or not we've hit 30 burn to activate that instead. The base version is quite boring, but has burn conditionals and HP conditionals for base power and coin power respectively. The enhanced S3 is where all the memes come from. Most notably the line, after using the skill, dies. This part is entirely unavoidable. Binary, death, set 1 on life to 0 kind of affair. But that's what makes it so funny to use. Effectively, we are preheating a bomb to explode by using her skills. This bomb has burn-based conditionals, HP conditionals, and is entirely unbreakable. While using this skill, she cannot drop under 1 HP, which is surprisingly useful when it counts, but otherwise matters little in the grand scheme of things. Regardless, once she explodes, she gets to trigger all the nice bonuses from her passive, as well as the skill's effects. Please do not detonate them off without the required amount of Wrath resources, or you will be sad that you lost a Sinner for an okay amount of damage and little else to speak of. Now, if for some reason we wish to prolong her life instead of exploding, the defensive skill exists. It's actually a really good evade, granting a lot of coin power on use so long as we have the burn. Of course, it also reduces the burn on her by up to 10, 5 on use, and 5 on evade, if for some reason we want to put out the flames. But realistically speaking, we're not going to get the most out of her kits unless we let her detonate. As for the rest of her passive, she's fireproof, at least in the sense that she can't fall under 1 HP due to burn, and she also gains 1 offense level per 6 burn on self the following turn. This can actually make her quite the strong clasher. There's one other important line here to be careful of though. It's actually the first line of the fueled passive. Odd that I'm covering this last. But anyhow, combat starts. If her HP is in Mertier range, and she has less than 30 burn, she'll go straight up to 30 once per encounter. If an S3 is slotted, she is going to explode. While it's a nice fallback to have, it can come as more of an annoyance if you're aiming to preserve her life instead of destroy it. If we get out of the way, we can look at implementing her. There's 2 diverging routes here. Keeping her alive and microing her burn to let her be an exceptional clashing unit, or letting her burn bright and explode with dignity. Since the latter will use her full kits, we'll be going with that. What's the deck identity then? The star is going to supernova, then who the hell is going to do the damage? Well, you see, we aren't exactly making a deck here. We're going to run a bloody restaurant. Now, I've got some experience in the hospitality industry. I've done my time at fancy Italian harborside cafes and Italian restaurantes. But you see, we're running a Chinese chicken shop. Plus, we're gonna need to hire the right staff. We're gonna need waiters. These guys need to be immaculately dressed, calm under pressure, and good at group combat if it comes to it. Huh. There's a fixer association that fits that bill entirely. Next, we're gonna need to source the meats. Tenderize it too. We're gonna need a butcher of dubious ethics. The guy over there with the big nails looks like a solid fit. Half his face looks melted off, but since he'll be back of house, the customers will never have to know. Alright, how could I forget? We'll need a proprietress to manage the crowd, and a security guard to put outside. The sink lass from the east will do, and I heard the Hay Show make the best bodyguards if you have their leashes. Regardless, we'll need an irritable individual to handle the open grill and scream when the meat is cooked, as well as a chef with a hazmat suit to work back of house with the butcher. What else was I missing? Ah, yes. Seasoning. Can't forget the seasoning. Heard the roots from this lantern thing make for an amazing dry rub. We'll be going with that. And of course, who could forget the main ingredients? The chicken. Good thing we've got 2 roosters ready for the slaughter, eh? Plus, let's introduce our Chinese takeaway chicken shop staff. First, the Lu Association fixers. As our front of house staff, they'll be on a rotating shift with one of them in backup should the need arise. Ryoshu, Rodya, and Ishmael will be the ones serving out the chicken. Ryoshu is our employee of the month. While they're only a 00, they can hit way above their weight class when required. Couple that with their access to 4th match flame, and we've got quite a solid base in any burn team. While she's rather basic in not having anything too special, in fact she's more or less just a burn status check, makes her a good indicator as to whether or not we've applied enough burn potency to get everyone else going. The conditionals max out at just 10 burn, meaning she'll be rather consistent so long as we maintain the potency. She doesn't add anything special to the service we're providing, but nonetheless, consistency is king. With that in mind, we can introduce the other 2 Lu fixers. First being Rodya. She has significantly more use on field compared to Ishmael. This is due to a Wrath Resonance passive that provides Wrath damage up, as well as burn conditional damage. Also provided is attack power up to any Lu fixers when these conditions are met. So long as everyone has at least 6 burn, all the Lus are going to get significantly stronger. Compared to Ryoshu, the conditionals max out at 12, but otherwise do not have any really strict requirements due to being an older ID. Plus, she's functionally a stat stick for us to wave around in a burn team. However, she does have some duck in her back pocket. Or they geese. Regardless, we're in the business of selling poultry. Indicant's Trial provides us healing, burn potency, and searing birdcage. The last of which is a unique status that reduces wrath resistance and inflicts bind on its victim. If we need fresh ingredients, at the very least front of house can make things easier for us in terms of dealing damage and restricting their speed. Last of consideration for backup is Lu Ishmael, so we'll be looking at her support passive. For the slowest member of our team, they'll inflict more blunt damage based on burn count on target. Bit difficult to get going at first, but with enough setup and tech, we can wrap this up reasonably quick in focused encounters, but may as well forget about it in unfocused ones. If an enemy somehow has 3 or more burn counts, yes, we're getting a little extra blip in damage. When she hits the field due to sinner deaths, she is very much a stat stick with low burn conditionals and rather decent outputs. In terms of egos, she provides Capote and Arasar Blossom, both of which can be rather valuable to have in burn composition. With the weight staff out of the way, we can look at the proprietress. This is going to be Sinki's Dawn. She's a rather self-sufficient modern ID with some reasonably solid conditionals. Compared to the Lus, she cares more about her own speed and micromanaging her poise. Only when that poise is at a reasonable level does she then factor burn potency into her damage through her passive. But like any good proprietress, she laces around until built up, before making it the customer's problem when both her speed reaches higher and the customer is already on fire. Aside from that, her potency application is half decent, and we're not wanting for ego resources on her, outside of potentially throwing out a red sheet. That thing will be relevant later as more staff is covered, plus I'll go over its usage when we arrive at play patterns. Next, let's cover some of our ingredients. First, let's welcome the seasoning. LCA Ego Lantern Yisang. He exists to be killed. Whether that be first or second, it matters not. Just that there's a proper way to kill him and a less proper way to do so. The skills are actually all quite fantastic, but they require a clash lose to get the most out of them. Since we want him to take damage, it's honestly not a bad thing to let him get hits. However, getting him hits may be a bit more difficult than expected outside of focused encounters. In unfocused encounters, he may accidentally start pulling his weight and surviving far too long. Of course, we could just not level him and make him die faster. If you make the mistake of leveling him, we don't have a way of going back right now. Thus, I'll proceed as if we had leveled him for whatever reason. We're going to want him to take clashes he has no business winning, losing them, getting hits, and then using his unbreakables to profit. His S3 is the highest priority though, as it gives him a unique status called Fairy Lure. Alternatively, the counter can work to set him up too. This makes him take significantly more damage as well as dramatically increase his aggro. Inside of a focus encounter, this all but guarantees all eyes on him. From there, you can basically just let him die. Plot in the counter so his assailant doesn't win a clash for SP, and let him expire. Once he kicks the bucket, we get 2 ego resources of 4 of the least owned. It's actually quite a lot, and of course, deal out 5 to 10 rupture potency and free counts, based on whether or not he has Fairy Lure upon expiry. Now if he dies first before the Moth will also functionally double the resources she obtains for the party as well, upon exploding. This idea is majorly slept on, but can act to turbo any game plan that requires ego resources to function, especially any that require rarer resources. From there we can cover the poultry. 2 Yo Branch Heishos. Let's start with Rooster Sinclair. This fella is heavily slept on because he didn't quite fit into Rupture and wasn't cool enough for burn compared to the Thumb Dude and Phil Clare. Anyhow, he's a unit that gets better as he takes more damage. Since there's plenty of unbreakable coins going out these days, we can profit off of his conditionals more often. His main gimmick lies in a unique buff called Blood Flame. It enables him to reuse coins, attack with unbreakables, and of course add extra potency to all of their coins. He gets this buff easiest through his counter, since it provides 3 stacks of it. Also of note is his Clash Lose conditionals, all of which provide him 2 burn to self. Whenever he has burn on self at the end of turn, he'll gain a Blood Flame, Wrath damage up, and Gluttony damage up. Plus, if he ever manages to be set on fire, he actually starts performing better. His HP conditionals max out rather quickly. Some of them even apply to enemies' HP too. Regardless, he's a strong Berserker style ID that can act as one of our main sources of damage. As for Cockcliff, this piece of poultry will start in our backline and be subbed in first, when either Faust or Yisung manage to kick the buckets. Compared to Sinclair, he needs a little more time to build up, like the other Heisho adepts. In this case, it's to build up his personal buff, Battle Blood Instincts. This gives him up to 15% more damage and 2 haste, as well as enabling his enhanced S3. Aside from that, he works around having Blood Flame and Self-Burn. He wants for 10 Self-Burn and 20 Battle Instincts before using his S3, since if he wins a clash with it, he'll apply 10 more burn to self, which enables the final coin reuse on the enhanced S3. Anyhow, I won't go too much more in depth in his kits, since it's quite a lot to cover. Just when he subs in, he gets a head start on burn counts, and starts with Blood Flame. Compared to Sinclair, Heathcliff of course has strong egos to use. Again, I'm going to bring up Holiday. Only this time, the man can actually set himself on fire more reliably. This is actually rather relevant this time. Now we only need to make sure the enemy has a buff of some kind, and we're golden for plenty of potency amp. Aside from that, we can use Binds, since he houses the 2 more common sins in this composition, being Gluttony and Wrath. All of that said, when both these roosters are on fire, they'll be dishing out the lion's share of our damage. Heathcliff is a little more solid for the longer fights in comparison, but both of them can majorly contribute once conditions are met. Regarding the man on the grill, we've got Firefist Gregor. He keeps the burn count healthy, and otherwise just hits really hard. His kit is really straightforward, with little to no micro required, and is just an auto-include and burn at this point. It's impossible to go wrong with our grill master here. As for most other builds, unfortunately, his egos don't stretch really far. Unbrilliant Glory is great, but again, that one is a limited affair. It also gets fueled almost purely through other sinners' deaths. As for door security, we've got Malodus. I know we're passing up Dark Flame here, and while fielding Magic Bullet would be amazing for burn damage, we're mostly here to fulfill conditionals rather than build around the team killer. They provide haste to the fastest on Gluttony Resin. In this case, it'll either be Sync Don or Yo Heathcliff. Sync Dawn stands to benefit a fair bit in this case, fixing her to going earlier and applying defense down more consistently for everyone else. Aside from that, we do have enough Rupture applications to take advantage of the 10% extra damage. If she ever hits the field somehow, we're going to be keeping the Magic Bullet in the back pockets. If it needs to go off, we'll have plenty of resources and resonance to stack it up, and fire off an Execution Bullet if required. Reasonably, she could replace Lu-ish in terms of subbing in too, since by the time at least 2 Sinners kick the bucket, there'll be a lot of burn built up on most bosses to take advantage of. As a back pocket option, Mao Otis can help us finish fights if required. If our wait staff aren't capable of handling the dining hall, we can send in security to clean up after them. Next, we're going to want to look at the dubious duo working the kitchen. First is Enkop Grosshammer Mersaltz. His support passive is the funny kind of conditional we're going to want on a team that is actively trying to kill itself or otherwise reduce its HP below half. For a measly free RAF resonance, we're going to be giving one of our dying sinners the ability to fight harder and die a little slower. This will be relevant on 4 of our on-field boys. Notably, Faust will benefit from this to explode more brilliantly with the added attack power, meanwhile the Roosters will benefit greatly with their skills due to the number of coins taking advantage of the attack power. Last, Yisung will die kinda slower, but his S3 does scale off of losing HP too. Setting him off with one last hurrah isn't the worst way for him to go either. As for the weirder of the duo, we're looking at the man in the hazmat suits. Jacob Hongers. This guy's passive can serve a few roles. 1. He can sustain any of our more berserker-minded units. They'll be healing 10% of their HP every turn after they're injected. Quite powerful if anything. 2. He can prolong Faust's explosive demise if need be. There will be just shy of a final explosion conditional of 90% missing HP, since 1 HP plus 10% is annoyingly over the threshold. Finally 3. He can execute units for us from the backline. If we play to lowering specific sinners' HP, we can ensure the ampules always land on those sinners. In this particular case, we can use it to kill Faust early or kill Yisung as required. This gives us a backup for killing our seasoning, as Yisung in unfocused encounters can be rather stubborn and may just refuse to kick the bucket properly. Unfortunately, this death does happen at turn starts, leaving us short a sinner for a turn. This puts us on the back foot a little, but considering our lineup, some of our IDs fight better when on the back foot regardless. Essentially, this crooked chef is also working the HR department, firing employees or otherwise rostering overtime. With all the staff out of the way, we can discuss play patterns. This one's going to be rather unique due to needing sinners to die and rotate in to take advantages of their entry bonuses. First, we're going to want to be smart with our deployment order. Anyone who dies grants their slots to the substituting ally. Since that ally will likely need some babying or build up, we're going to want to deploy Faust earlier rather than later. Same with Yisung. In this regard, I'd recommend Faust followed by Yisung. Yo Sinclair, Don, Firefist, then either of the fielded Lus. We can then place Heathcliff in backup and pick between either Otis or Ishmael, depending on what we may need to close out the encounter. If it's high single target and amazing clashing, we can consider Ishmael. Otherwise, Otis may be able to Dark Flame a group if set up correctly, or execute a target through Dark Flame spam. Starting out, we're going to want to preheat the fryer. This means using an S2 on Faust turn 1. If we miss that, we're going to be real slow until we get one. Not necessarily bad enough to warrant a reset, but if we want her online as fast as possible, we really need her to pull one off. From there, we want her to spam out S1s until she reaches at least 23 burn, and then detonate at 30 for all the benefits we're after. In the meantime, we want to prepare the seasoning and the chicken. Lance and Yisung will want to either use his S3 or counter for Fairy Lure, and likewise use the counter or S3 for Sinclair. Aside from that, we'll be wanting to activate Sinner passives with the rest of front of house staff. Faust and Yisung come first, meaning we'll be wanting free Gluttony and free Wrath if possible. Between the two Lus, Gregor, and Sync East Don, we've got a few patterns that can get that working. Yisung and Sinclair potentially locked into Gluttony, we only need an S1 from Yoroshu or Don to have free Gluttony ready almost immediately. For Wrath, Gregor should have it at least 50% of the time, Yoroshu or Don should also have access to it, and Rodya can easily get it out too. We're going to want to lock these resources up and not use them until both the relevant IDs have otherwise managed to die. Otherwise, their deaths will provide little to nothing to write home about. Past there, we can build up some egos while looking at angles for 2 sinners to die. 4th Match Flame and Indicant's Trial are both Wrath and Pride heavy, meaning we can fish for those if possible. Faust can output some Pride alongside Rodya and Don, while the rest of the others can focus on additional Wrath and Gluttony. When both our sinners eventually pop, whether through natural means or Honger's HR violations, we can start substituting in units and getting those online. We can also begin popping egos to stim further game plans. Here is where Red Sheet can be utilized. On the turn after Yisung dies, we should have more than enough resources to fuel this ego, and Don has ways of ramping up haste. We can all but guarantee this going first. Hitting a 6 Gluttony res, we can guarantee the maximum value out of this ego and pump forward some quick bursts of ruptured damage, in addition to the burn we would have otherwise put out. Red Sheet's passive will also grant Dawn further ways of inflicting defense down and stim up everyone else's damage. From there, we rely on the poultry to satisfy guests, the waitstaff to accommodate their clashing needs, and of course the restaurant to burn down and take everyone with it. Plus, to summarize, preheat the oven, season and prepare the chicken. Once primed, fire up the grill and finish the chicken, and have waitstaff serve. Accommodate to guests' needs and provide seconds and thirds if needed. If any rowdier guests can't be contained by the waitstaff, send in security to finish the job instead. Oh, and if anyone is caught slacking off, commit a few HR violations to give them overtime or have them replaced on the spot. Once all that is done, we'll have some quality Kung Pao chicken and some very satisfied guests. See, hospitality is easy. You just need to have the right pieces to put everything together. In all seriousness though, this build was just a weird fever dream that I figured after slamming my head against the wall to get Elsie forced to function. And really, there's a lot of effort. You needed a few more safeguards to make her particularly useful. Some quality of life would have gone a long way. Having stagger bars at all makes her troublesome to use, since if the enemy has unbreakable coins or ever wins a clash, she's gonna get staggered hard, and likely die without popping off her S3. The burn count limitations are a pain to micromanage at times. You could really use a bit more count to help it stay consistent. And most annoying of all, she can't even fuel 9.2 on her own. It's like the one burn ego she has. With the amount of potency she puts out, it'd be a damn good one to be able to use. Regardless, designing a composition around her limitations was fun to do. She's not a heavy hitter, neither does she supply any crazy amount of utility compared to more dedicated supports, but at least she can set things on fire, clash half decently, and go out with a bang before letting others pick up the pieces. Oh, and she just dies to bleed. Forgot about that. Real annoying, that one. If she wins a clash, she can just die to bloody bleed. Alrighty. TCA Heathcliff is a cool guy. Man looks after his teammates, bails them out of rough situations. However, he's like that unreliable big brother that you need to bug a lot. After bugging them enough though, they always pull through. That's the experience using this ID. Takes a decent bit of babying if you want to use his entire kits, else otherwise he's a little unreliable. Man's whole appeal is at S3. Massive beam of light that slams into enemies, rolling stupid high and being unbreakable to boots. This thing has a lot of conditionals and difficult to reasonably reach ones outside of MD, but the payoff isn't quite as great as it may initially seem. It lacks a lot of damage increasing conditionals and realistically only gains a stupid amount of coin power upon usage. There's no deal 100% extra damage or execution damage or status based conditionals. It's kinda just an almost vanilla beat stick. A rather unusual one though, since it has the capacity to do mixed damage on the final coin. That being said, we have a stupid consistent way of always having this thing on hand every other turn. The rest of his kit is a bit of a slouch as well. It requires a lot of effort to get him properly online and get the most out of him, especially with the fact that he uses charge potency in a lot of his conditionals rather than strictly charge count. His S1 is particularly sad, needing charge potency to even get coin power, and otherwise only getting clash power for charge count. He also needs 12 count to get the maximum out of this, where he finds it difficult to organically boost his counts outside of his S1 and defensive skills. It would take using his S1 3 times before he would see the full benefit of the clash power, and even then, he would have built up 0 potency. Whenever our only option is to use this skill, it's usually better to just slot in defense instead, as it will contribute far more than using an S1 outside of Cherry Tap. S2 is notably better, acting closer to what you'd expect out of a charge ID. It consumes 6 charge counts for coin power, and also has charge potency based coin power too. There is, however, only 2 coins. While they roll rather high since the base and number of coins is low, this skill is rather unreliable and depressing to use while his sanity is low. We do get a charge barrier, which can convert into charge counts as long as it isn't popped, so it's not all doom and gloom with this skill. But it really needs sanity to be topped off. It also makes things far more difficult to set up than you'd expect due to being count neutral when we have more than 6 counts unless charge barrier manages to activate, topping us up by a fair bit. This becomes more reliable as we ramp up, but otherwise is an almost non-factor early on. His defense skill is still higher priority than this one as well. As for the actual mechanics of his S3, it rolls pathetically low unless we consume at least 10 charge counts. While this is similar to other W Corp IDs in functionality, his lacking charge build-up from his other base skills makes this far, far worse. With enough charge count though, this skill is a monster clasher, rolling a rather absurd amount for clashing and even higher for damage should the stars align. The final coin can roll stupid high with up to 16 fucking coin power. This needs him to have 10 charge counts by the time we reach his final coin. This can be exceedingly stupid. Mind you, that is the only count related portion. This monstrosity also comes with potency based conditionals, though most of those are more for consistency as it offers up to 5 clash power, 1-to-1 with potency, and up to 50% extra damage on his final coin, as slash damage instead of blunt. Now, while this thing can on its own rack up a 37 for the final coin, that's not the entire story. If you've seen my Captain Ishmael video, you know that I've been leaving out some really crucial details thus far. The glue that sticks his entire kit together, the elephant in the room, his defense skill. It's a rather vanilla clashable guard, with only one conditional. If he has less than 15 charge count at combat start, he will gain the overcharge status next turn. Effectively, this stuns him in a rather annoying way. He's immobilized. This means he can't take any actions for the turn, but isn't necessarily staggered. This also means he can accidentally break our resonance chains due to him logically being slotted in where his speed would otherwise have placed him. As a trade-off for this immobilization, he gets a ridiculous amount of benefits to make use of. He reduces incoming damage by up to 25%, gets a bloody charge barrier that if left unpopped can feed his charge count, gets plus 10 charge counts and plus 2 attack power the next turn, gets up to 5 aggro, and beyond all of that, every time something hits him, he gets up to 5 load and charge counts. On top of all of that, it removes his first stagger bar and fetches us an S3 to use on the following turn. Functionally, so long as we use a defense skill, we can completely ignore S1 and S2, which is just weird. I'll have many more complaints about this during the play pattern section. Regardless, his passive is rather good. By eating charge counts, he gains potency. Due to flushing a lot out with his S3, he can stack it at a rather okay pace, considering its all but guaranteed usage every 3 turns. He also gains defense level equal to his charge potency, which helps him survive more hits. With his fueled passive, he gains shield if at less than 50% HP, and a bit more shield before getting hits. It's all added tankiness for the most part. The last part though gives him more damage if he manages to gain charge counts beyond the maximum upon using a skill. There aren't going to be many cases of this actually happening outside of his S1 and ego usage. With all of the above jank in mind, where the heck can we fit this dude? Rather, how can we build a team that makes use of all of his capabilities? Well, we need to build an NV charge team. But Eco, haven't you already done that with Captain Ishmael last month? Yeah, I did in fact do that, but this time we're going to incorporate a bit more bleed support to allow some funny passive jank. But Captain Ishmael already had bleed. Nowhere near enough, Chief. Not for where we're going. We are going to make use of CCA Heathcliff as a consistency core. He's going to tank for 2 turns before bursting on the 3rd. 1 turn spent on his defensive skill, 1 turn spent in overcharge, the 3rd turn spent using his S3. Since he's Heathcliff, we're also going to want to mix in binds or telepole to fire things up a notch as well. To that end, we're going to need to mix in some sinners with gloom, pride, and lust as well. Thankfully, these are rather easy to come by, but a little jank to fit if we're unlucky. Since we've got a tank at least, we're going to want a healer and a DPS too. Oh, I guess we're turning this into a holy trinity kind of affair. Shouldn't be too hard, though that does mean our main focus is going to be almost exclusively on focused encounters rather than unfocused ones. In that case, we're going to need some real consistent pinch hitters and smart play to make things work this time, compared to the more brain-off bejeweled strategy from Captain Ish's team. Let's look at our core first then. Say hello to Middle Sinclair again. This time we're actually letting him get his bleed coin conditionals. While we're not going to have perfect NV res on every turn to send him, we are going to aim for as many as possible while maintaining some semblance of bleed counts to let him hit significantly harder. S1 and S2 benefit from at least 6 bleed on targets, which he can't really do on his own. And S3 requires a whopping 12, which is basically impossible for him. With the jank I'll propose later, we'll be attempting to fix this. So compared to last time where I just slotted him in for the NV resonance parts of his kit alone, we're going the full distance this time. Since Heathcliff will be taking a whole bunch of guaranteed hits this time as well, Sinclair will be getting plenty of opportunities to stack up those vengeance marks and slap back at maximum force. Aside from that, he can provision Hexnail. Sinclair's version of Hexnail is more debuff oriented, offering plenty of curse, some bleed, and bind. The passive can also give us defense power up and protection should he be hit by negative effects. Since he'll be getting hit to proc his counters, the amount of debuffs he'll be carrying is likely to be higher than 0. meaning we can milk this passive for more damage. Regardless, his kit is straightforward enough, so we'll be moving on to our first package deal. We've got the R-Corp 4th pack, specifically Mersault, Hongers, and Ishmael. One of these will always be on the field, while the others can be swapped on field as necessary. Rhino Mersault is our bleed solution. He provides a stupid amount of bleed count that we can abuse for various passives and coin power conditionals as required. We don't need to stack it very high either, since no one needs more than 12 potency to get full power out of their conditionals. Rhino Mersault has an NV guard skill, meaning he'll always be ready for resonance as required. During off-NV turns, he can use his S2 and S3 to inflict a rather large amount of bleed. There's plenty of utility outside of just providing NV. Of course, there's a very specific ego that's very powerful that I neglected to mention with the Captain Ishmael video. Since we're fielding him this time rather than keeping him in the back, we can use Electric Screaming. This ego is an uptype 4 or bust, since the benefits of getting it maxed out are huge for NV-based teams. This ego is a stupid battery cell that is relatively cheap to fuel. Plus, during NV resonance turns, we can opt to use this in the chain to massively boost outgoing charge count for up to 5 allies. Since we've only got 5 other charge IDs on the field, this is rather huge and perfectly efficient, as long as we can execute it during a full NV resin. It's a plus 52 charge count overall, and 2 NV damage up for 1 RAF and 4 NV if we play our cards right. The passive is also Mini Bind's passive, giving defense and offense levels up, self and 2 adjacent sinners on the dashboard. As for the other 2, Honger's bench passive gives us 15% to our final coin. While it's not exactly a guarantee that Heathcliff will receive it, it's a rather consistent passive nonetheless. If he ever hits the field, he'll be a bit of a wet noodle as he tries to build up. We can still contribute through raising stagger threshold and some base amount of sinking to edge out the sanity advantages. The same can be said of Ishmael. He grants us blunt damage to the ally with the least SP. There's plenty of good targets for it, but it'll likely land on one of our specific DPS sinners that we'll mention later. If she ever hits the field, she doesn't need as much time to build up compared to Hongers, but doesn't have as high a ceiling. Both of them do offer about the same thing though. Next, we can look into a support. This one will be W-Corp Otis. While her NV resonance capabilities are on the lighter end, she provisions load and pride resources. We'll be needing pride for the eventual bind usage. Aside from load, her NV skill does provide us charge barrier as well. If we time it for the turn after Heathcliff dumps all of his charge, we can all but guarantee it landing on him. Otherwise, we could gamble on it going after Heathcliff's dumping of charge on the same turn if we wish to stack it on him earlier. Past there, she can provision Clash Power to Heathcliff through her passive, and some binds application as required. In terms of ego, he can provision Dimension Shredder. This one is a little more selfish, but otherwise can be a screen clearer for ad phases in focused encounters, or for clearing chaff in general. From there, we can look to a few more solos to be including. Charge is full of these, since realistically speaking, many charge units are self-sufficient. First, we can look at one of our DPS sinners, Multi-Crack Fast. There isn't all too much to say here that hasn't already been said. She builds up potency, dumps it, and if she lands a kill, shares some of the counter out. In terms of skills to look out for, we want to hit her S3 the turn before a big NV damage push, since she can inflict up to 2 NV fragile on our targets. Past there, she has some execution damage, the ease on her on-kill charge sharing a little more. In terms of egos, she can pretty much fuel fluid sack on her own. She can also overclock Hex now opportunistically if she is faster than the rest of the team, for a stupid amount of NV fragility, as well as some nails to stretch that bleed a little more. Next, we want to slot in Red Eyes and Penitent's Ryoshu. We're finally going to make use of her. Since we're running a slower paced team, we can benefit from her more so compared to W-Corp Ryoshu's Glass Cannon approach. Since we can also maintain some semblance of bleed on targets, we're also going to be able to turbo Ryoshu a little more thanks to her passive and S3. Specifically, Red Eye's gain will be a decent bit faster as it scales quite fast with any semblance of bleed on target. She's an odd unit. Almost all of her utility and damage is packed into her S3, that of which provides healing for both HP and SP. This heal can go out to quite a few allies based on resonance too. For both Sinclair and Heathcliff, who are likely to be taking hits, can benefit at the same time. That said, more of her utility lies in her egos. We're looking at the Red Eyes combo. The first one is a lot of utility through bind application and plus coin drop. The passive also allows her to inflict bind on Clash Winds too. Next, we'd want Red Eyes Open. This one is rather useful to have since we'll be able to increase her consistency with our Envy Resonance team. Since she doesn't have an Envy defense skill, on turns where we need that Envy Resin but don't have any S1s, we can slot this instead to meet such requirements. As for Luxury, if we can stomach a Contempt Orb, that's an option, but it's not a particularly high priority in this composition. As for the last solo, we're looking at our biggest damage dealer in the entire composition, Fiend of Hatred Dawn. I've spoken at length about her in my Captain Ishmael video, so I'll try to be brief. She's most likely going to eat up most of our damage boosting support passives. Lowest SP, it's her. Most charge, odds are it's her. Regardless, she has 3 Envy skills like Sinclair, one of which being her defensive skill. She's got tools for both single target and AoE, as well as access to Wrath. The Wrath is going to be our most precious resource. We're going to need as much as possible for egos, enough to perhaps consider throwing in Hongers over Force. Regardless though, Dawn builds up like any other charge ID. Throws a funny mark on them and hits them with a massive laser beam while maintaining several other buffs to amplify her damage. If we use her linked ego as well, she gets more damage potential by adding an extra S3 to her bucket. We just need to make sure we slot this in while her SP is positive. If you'd like a bit of a deeper dive on her, see the Captain Ishmael video rather than this one. Anyhow, with all the on-field fellas and some of the supports out of the way, I'll outline the last few. First is Dichi Rodya. Heathcliff is 100% the Sinner with the highest maximum HP. He's going to take damage during his overload turns with any luck. Since the passive also mentions shield being factored in, Heathcliff's additional tankiness won't get in the way either. All this for up to 3 blunt damage up. Since his S3 doesn't otherwise have any good ways of buffing or increasing his damage, the more sources of damage we can get, the better. It's also significantly easier to fuel in this team with the extra gloom around. Next, we're looking at the HP and SP healing duo. First off is Ring Sung. This fella lets us heal SP based off of negative effects. More SP if we hit something with bleed on it. Since we've set ourselves up with more bleed in this composition, we can capitalize off of the boosted SP heals through the passive effects. As for the other side of things, we've got Priest Gregor. This guy is similar in allowing HP healing when hitting a target. More HP if the target has bleed. This one, however, only activates on Lust Resonance. We have exactly 3 Sinners with Lust that can activate this, so if needs must, Ryoshu, Forced, and Mersault can give a Sinner with the lowest HP a chance to top up slightly. Though both of these are some exceedingly jank ways of getting both HP and SP back, when combined with Fluid Sac and Ryoshu's S3, we have a surprising amount of sustain. If the painter hits the field, he can at least carry his own, even without much in the way of support. As for the priest, he's kinda dead in the water unless we manage to do much more bleed damage in previous. Since all the sinners have been covered, we can move on to play patterns. Deployment order isn't quite as important here since almost everyone just soups together. Since each of the support passives only checks for conditions where there's a clear winner a majority of the time, we don't have to position anyone particularly aggressively. Couple that with the fact that this setup is mainly for focused encounters rather than unfocused, and we don't have to adjust all too much. If anything, we're looking to only touch the backup order in case of trouble. Thus, after souping the 7 on-field sinners, we'll want the 2 reindeers first, followed by the painter, the Dichi, and finally the priest. With any luck, the priest can hold on long enough with their death cheats to close out any encounters where everyone else has somehow kicked the bucket. Anyhow, we'll want to activate as many passives as possible right away. This means making turn 1 an on-turn for Envy Resonance. We can activate as many as 5 of the on-field passives, so long as we hit at least 5 Envy. If possible, we'd be looking to mix in some Wrath, Gloom, or Lust along the way, prioritizing Gloom for Ryoshu's passive, and 2 support passives. On turn 2, we can aim for all of our off-Envy affinities. We should be looking for at least 1 Wrath if possible, to enable an Electric Screaming the following turn. Try to avoid Envy here so we can guarantee a full Envy Resonance on the 3rd turn. High priorities are Gloom and Lust after Wrath. On turn 3, Heathcliff should be finished charging up. If Mersault is faster than him or if the other sinners are behind on charge, plot in an Electric Screaming and paint the dashboard purple. This should result in a pretty big on-turn for Envy. With any luck or proper redirection, Heathcliff should already be at 3 charge potency by dumping 20 charge all at once. On turn 4, we're looking to loop the above. We don't have to as aggressively look for an on-turn this time. Instead, we'll be wanting to fish for resources for buy-ins. Plot in Heathcliff's defensive once again, as we're going to get him to overcharge in preparation for turn 6. On turn 5, we're looking to get off colors once again. If there's any odd egos we'd like to use, now would be the time. Sinclair's Hex Nail comes to mind, but since it eats pride, it should only be considered if we intend to end the fight earlier, or if we aren't saving resources for binds. If the encounter provides extra ego resources or we're going in with them, just let it rip. That aside, turn 6 is another on turn for Envy. We're blasting Electric Screaming again, alongside Heathcliff's S3 and everyone else's Envy skills. If Frost is going faster, we can also slot in an overclocked Hex Nail to nuke out more Envy damage. As we paint the board purple for a second time, most normal encounters should be over. For major Kanto bosses and beyond, we want to take turn 7 to hit the binds button, and from there, we loop the rotation again and again until the boss is dead. For individual ID game plans, Force wants to build and burn potency. Off turns are best for the build up, as an Envy Res using her S2 will automatically nuke her count to 0 due to burning it for more damage. During an off turn before the on turn, we're going to want to have an S3 on hand if possible, to dump out as much damage the following turn with Envy Fragility. To max out Force's S2 damage, you'll need to burn a total of 40 charge. While this will naturally occur over time, being conscious of using her S3s before S2s will go a long way in burning towards it a lot faster. Plus for Frost, if we can loop an S2 into an S3 into an S2 again, Frost will be able to dump a rather ridiculous amount of damage out up front while pumping everyone's turn 3 damage by 20% due to being able to hand out 2 Envy Fragility. If we're bold enough, we can nuke out a Hex Nail on that turn 3 for even more Envy Fragility, but we'd likely be dipping into our passive resources in doing so, making it better used for the second loop around. Sinclair just needs to monkey their way through. Since Heathcliff is getting hits and Sinclair is going to get hit when using a counter, we just need to make sure we hit the boss in order to claim the Vengeance stacks. Once we're turboed towards 30 Vengeance stacks, we'll just start hitting harder and harder. If Massault can apply enough counts, we can even pile on the potency with Roshu and Sinclair both to meet his conditionals. We'll feel the impact mostly on his S3, since it'll get an additional 6 power from the coin power conditionals. For ego use, if we can squeeze out a Hex Nail, we can amp his counter abilities and increase his survivability if need be. It'll be unlikely though due to our scarce pride resources. For Don, we can funk the Unga as well. While we want to gain love and hate through spending charge, we can build up a little more during off turns with our S1. S2 generates and consumes, while S3 is a full funnel. If possible, we'll want to S2 on turn 1, S1 on turn 2, and S3 on turn 3 for plenty of damage. Now if we can cheat in 4 Envy Res on all 3 turns, we're getting the maximum damage boost on Magical Arcana 2. If we do so, however, expect an instant nuke down to minus 25 SP, and for the negative half of her kit to trigger. She'll be here for a while unless we can heal her SP out of it. Otherwise, expect egos to be locked out for her. If we want to consider using her linked ego, we'll have to do it while she's still positive. Very expensive and unlikely to come out, unless we go for a third rotation. At which points, I feel that we'd rather want to hit the binds button. If resources aren't a concern though, getting this out at all is a major buff to the team and Don's damage. As for Roshu, we'll want to preserve our S1s for Envy turns, and mainly focus on using S2 and S3. S2 stretches especially far if we can keep bleed on the target through the Rhino. Furious Skullbuster will likely have for either turn 4 or 5 as required. The rather hard-hitting nuke, as well as applying some funny healing of HP and SP. We can sneak it in to a bigger resin as well to spread out the healing. On an off turn, getting a 4 resin of anything alongside it will already max out the benefit. Regardless, if we somehow sneak in a Red Eyes Open, it suddenly becomes quite strong after every Skullbuster due to the attack power up post heal. For most of the rest, their play is either guided by the above rotation, or is otherwise rather simple. Now for the mildly jank parts surrounding Heathcliff's kits, the S1 does virtually nothing, even with charge. It only really gets slightly better and doesn't help us reach all too many breakpoints in terms of consuming or generating charge. If it comes up and we have to use it, we may as well just slot a defensive or an ego instead. As for his S2, this one can actually give us a few things to consider. First off, if we can get charge barrier through its effects, it becomes significantly more useful. It may just make enough charge for us to use an S2 before an S3 instead, to avoid needing to waste a turn for overcharge. Unfortunately, this is a bit more of a side grade. The S3 won't be quite as strong due to not getting any load, proccing Roger's passive or getting attack power. Aside from that, since we're not getting hits, we wouldn't have any extra charge to execute a stronger S3 outside of counts from the skill itself. that of which is an on-heads hit rather than just hits. We can, unfortunately, be screwed out of the maximum final coin potential just a little easier. Now, alternatively, if the turn after an S3 we use an S2, then delay even further with a defensive skill, it's a guaranteed maximum power S3, but makes the rotation so much longer at 4 turns instead of 3. This effectively desyncs everyone else in the team as well, potentially causing the team to just not line up quite as easily with their skill buckets. While the S2 is a side grade to using as defensive skill, it's rather troublesome to use even if we wanted to. In summary though, Envy on turn 1, Envy off turn 2, dump Envy turn 3. Rinse and repeat while adjusting minigames as required. Do that a few times and most bosses should be dead in a reasonable amount of time. If they're not dead yet, well, at least you won't be dying due to the healing provided through Roshu and the back line. Thanks for watching another dive into an ID that's been slandered way too hard. I like this cool guy. Once again, he's that useless older brother that comes in clutch when you need. Alrighty. Night Owl's Capitano Gregor is an exceedingly fun ID to build around. While there's a lot of hard meta builds out there centered around Tremor or Bleed purely, I'd like to execute upon some real jank strategy for this one. So out of the way first, I would not recommend people to build a team with him this way necessarily. However, we do get access to some really fun tools this time around. First off, Man is based off of Alan from Library of Ruiners General Receptions. He's a member of the Night Owls, a syndicate under the Thumb. Under threats of being purged, they took a desperate gamble to grab books from the library to sway the fight over Old L-Corp in their favor. This would have saved them from the purge and given them a one-up on the index. However, as with all that venture into the library, things don't go quite as planned. Regardless, everyone posits this guy as a single target extraordinaire. Weirdly enough, the closest way I can describe this guy is PSO2's Gunner. Real high single target damage, but heavily reliant on a single status effect / mark makes things very awkward. In Gunner's case, this was chain and chain trigger finishes, which had the main issue of dying with a target and needing its stacks to be rebuilt. In many ways, they are similar. This is due to his unique status effects being open, deep, and fatal wounds, all of which require him to hit a target multiple times in a row to stack it up for stronger and stronger returns. Notably for Bind, Bleed Count on Tremor Burst, and finally improving both effects substantially for a number of turns equal to the stack before resetting it. While this thing isn't the be-all and end-all of his kits, it does enable a lot of his additional damage. For that be-all and end-all though, we instead want to look at Mercy. This single coin shank is a surprisingly strong second S1 that scales off of missing HP on target. Under specific conditions, it can be reused multiple times a turn. As fights drag on and more of its conditionals are met, we can see this thing proc constantly. While most things don't last long enough to get to the 20% window to proc Mercy quite as often in Limbus, in harder difficulty fights or team compositions with older IDs, we can supplement their damage with this on-demand executes. As for the rest of his kits, it's rather straightforward, much like his original counterpart. Functionally, he is John Pierce. His S1 gives him haste while applying Tremor and Bleed potency. As with all his skills, it also applies his unique status. The S2 is much the same, but with more coins and instead applying count rather than potency. Instead of getting haste though, we get Tremor potency and burst upon winning clashes instead. Functionally, this is a free activation of his unique status once it hits the deep wound stage. Aside from that, if the target is 20% or under, he'll Mercy after hitting it with his third coin. He'll also Mercy if his status is on the fatal wound stage. Regarding his S3, it comes in two versions. First being a fusion of his S1 and S2, first bursting on a clash win, then applying a fair bit of status. The last coin also applies amplitude conversion into Tremor Hemorrhage, giving anyone with access to Tremor Burst some more damage to play with. Likewise, this last coin also Tremor Bursts and can proc Mercy if the target is at 20% HP or under, else has Fatal Wound. The second version of his S3 activates if the target has Deep Wound, adding a lot more damage conditionals before doing much the same as the above. Procs a Tremor Burst on Clash Win, inflicts a lot of status potency with a side of count, triggers amplitude conversion, then single or triple Tremor Burst on top of that. Oh, and most importantly, converts Deep Wound stacks into Fatal Wound stacks next turn. There is, however, no Mercy conditional on the final coin in comparison. This second version only activates on Deep Wound, so don't expect to get multiple procs of it on following turns, as Fatal Wound instead enables the rest of the kits to give out free Mercies. As for his defense skill, the run-of-the-mill Clashable Guard with some haste and tremor application. It does let him proc Mercy off of others twice instead of just once with his passive. His always active passive just restricts his Mercy to 2, unless external effects allow him to reuse it, while his fueled passive allows him to gain a bunch of benefits that extend his kit's utility and damage potential. First, if he breaks anything or kills a target, he gets 2 final power to all his skills via 2 pierce power up. Past there, his base skills all inflict defense power down if he's faster than them, which is becoming increasingly more useful with bosses having defensives slotted in most of their patterns. Aside from that, he uses his S1-2 as an assist attack if an ally leaves a target with 20% or less HP after their attack. This can proc once by default, twice if he uses his defensive skill on that turn. If there is only a single target, he'll also trigger this assist attack if that target has been staggered. All of the above makes for a single target-minded approach with some nice execution spam should conditionals be appropriately met. In group-based encounters, we'll mainly be getting our mileage out of his Mercy to finish off nearly downed opponents, as well as his additional pierce power that helps him string together clashes and kills. To that end, we've got a bunch of conditionals required to make him function particularly well. First off, he needs to attack often. There's a couple of ways to ensure this, but the easiest is to place him either in the first deployment slot or to underslot. Past there, we could run an ID that lets him get in an additional assist attack, though that specific ID may be a bit more difficult to properly fit here, so I'll cover them when we reach their slots. Next, we need to keep an appropriate amount of status application of both Tremor and Bleed. This will increase his coin power, boosting his skills dramatically. This part is rather unavoidable as he is a modern ID, so he'll perform far better with consistent Tremor and Bleed on target, especially with his S3. The magic number here is 12, split between Bleed and Tremor, which is surprisingly easy with the right setup. We're going to want some sources of haste and bind outside of Gregor himself. While this only ups the damage on Gregor's S3 specifically, it does also allow us to guarantee the defense power down from his passive. The faster we are though, the easier it is for us to apply Bleed and Tremor bursts too. Considering these bursts also double as bleed counts, being able to consistently get them is appreciated. Couple that with the need for clashing to trigger bursts, as well as the additional tremor application, and being faster than the target allows us a lot more flexibility regardless. While we could from there look for pierce fragility or power, the sources of them lie mainly in the full stop package, which hurts our status application significantly since we are currently juggling 2 different core status effects. All that said, we do have ways of amplifying outgoing damage in some rather interesting ways. To that end, welcome to a dual status deck. We're going to do our best to make use of both Bleed and Tremor's main advantages, as well as amplify Gregor's contributions to outgoing damage where possible. He'll be one of our main damage dealers, and we'll be looking to capitalize on his capabilities as much as we can. This time I'll say we don't really have any staples here. He is quite a flexible unit, and there's many ways to reach his requirements. That being said, the plan will be to implement 2 packages and up to 2 solos to amplify his existing abilities. First, let's welcome Ncorp Ryoshu as our first solo. She applies both Bleed and Tremor while being relatively self-sufficient. As a more modern ID, she also comes packaged with status-based coin power conditionals, out of which line up really cleanly with Gregor's. Her S1 and 2 line up with Gregor's Magic 12, while her S3 needs a little more juice at 16. Regardless, since she provides us both, she can help turbo up both numbers as required. Though her application is rather weak, she doesn't eat up all too much either. Anything that has a Tremor Burst attached to it also gives Tremor counts back. Bleed, on the other hand, needs far more help, and she's not going to be the one to provide that help. That being said, a lot of Ryoshu's power budget is in her egos as well. In this particular case, we're actually going to make use of 4 egos on her. Forest with the Flames is sleeper good. It's really easy to fuel and gives us up to 2 fragile for the following turn. We can slot this in before a huge burst turn to massively profit from the amplified damage. Past there we can use Red Eyes for bind and a bunch of other useful status effects. After using it, she can apply bind for free on Clash Winds, which makes bind almost permanent on any target we're facing. More luxury would come from the He slot, however. While we could use Forcalgia without other sources of poise, it's less useful, so instead, we can explore the use of Red Eyes open. This ego is pretty cool and overlooked. It's functionally just a damage nuke that amps itself up with higher speed difference. If we want something a little more consistent in comparison, we can of course run 4th Match Flame. The extra 4 skill power goes real hard. Surprisingly, this thing is also going to be rather easy to fuel with the rest of the team's composition. 4 final power on her AoEs can hit exceedingly hard when utilized correctly, whether it be an empowered S3 or the next ego, that being Contempt Orb. I find it's a must on this particular ID. While we're not going to use it to enable Fell Bullet this time, we are going to use it for the Bleed Stim and Ego resource generation. Lust Resonance is going to be very easy to come by here. Rather, almost everyone we're fielding has it in their affinity or their defensive skill, bar Ryoshu herself. When it goes off, it will accelerate our game plan a fair bit, which in turn will allow Gregor to contribute more through his skills. Next, we're going to look at our second solo. This is going to be Ring-san. Yes, the dreaded poster child of power creep himself. While others may claim that his count application can be unusual and unstable, we're actually looking to make use of 3 out of the 5 main debuff statuses to our advantage. Bleed and Tremor are a given, but Sinking as well can come in handy for lowering an opponent's SP. It's not going to be much, however, we'll be including other means real soon to stim up this little edge. Now Ring-san wants for 4 to 5 negative status effects on target, make use of his coin reuse on his S2, and the boosted damage on his S3. Disgustingly, between Ryoshu and Gregor, they already have enough negative status effects for both of these conditionals, with wounds and gaze practically being permanent, multiple sources of bind, including wounds, as well as of course tremor and bleed application. Between their kits, they can more than make up Ring-san's disgusting conditionals, allowing the painter to do what he does best and brush through our enemies with impunity. Of note, he has easy access to Lust as well as providing us some gloom for other egos. The little pip of sloth he has as well will help us with some more conditional egos too. Speaking of egos, we're going to be abusing Crow's Eye View specifically. This thing all but activates Gregor's S3-2, haste, and bind conditional in one go, at least so long as it's Fred Spin 4. It grants 3 haste and inflicts 2 bind. Since there's going to be a deep wound before activating S3-2, there should be bind on the target already. While Gregor could stand to fuel this himself, we can get a surprising amount of value out of it regardless. Painter being rather self-explanatory, we can then move on to our packages. First, let's get the familiar one out of the way. Welcome to the stage, the Kurokumo clan. We're only taking the leaders on the field this time, with one of the other clan members sitting in the backfield. Heathcliff and Ishmael provide us really consistent bleed potency. As long as we can get a Lust Resonance going, they're going to be getting Dark Cloud Blade, allowing to stim all of their bleed potency numbers by 1. While we won't be getting the advantages from killing off other clan members, these two are a rather self-sufficient duo and give us much needed bleed potency to work around. Heathcliff especially has the capability of providing potency without clashing, allowing us to raise some potency without having to drill as hard into our count. Due to the next package, we may expect to get hit a decent bit, therefore his retaliation capabilities can be stretched quite a bit further. Ishmael just provides plenty of buffs to Heathcliff, also allowing him to go unbreakable with the appropriate resonances. To cap them both off, they both have negative status effect conditionals, up to 10 on their S3s. With their inclusion, we get flash fragility, attack power down, and of course offense level down, to add to the negative effects pool. This places up to 8 statuses we can consistently inflict. 3 others may get inflicted by the painter, so we're already at a soft 11 potential status effects. Mind you, these aren't going to be the last of them provided by any stretch of the imagination. In terms of egos, Heathcliff provides Holiday, Asymmetrical Inertia, and Bind. Holiday allows him to fuel his status application further, so long as its conditions are met. Admittedly, this will get very limited use outside of specific boss fights. Asymmetrical Inertia provides us with an additional source of Fragile. Since Gregor is going to Tremor Burst before attacking with 2 out of 3 of his skills, this means that Gregor will 50% of the time be hitting a target with Fragile applied to them. Of course, Ryoshu can also proc the Tremor Burst, giving us more options to apply this Fragile from Broken Bell as required. Clock Winding isn't as important here, we can just make use of the passive to great effect as we need it. Bind, on the other hand, is rather expensive to fuel here, especially with the Gloom requirement. However, if Bind's needs to come out, the fight is likely to be over once we abuse its effects with a full board of Lust Resonance. Meanwhile, Ishmael has 4 beneficial egos to our man, Gregor. Yes, there is a lot of egos this time, but Gregor can make use of so many other sinners' egos rather than his own, which honestly is perfectly fine in this case. Snag Harpoon is a bind, tremor application, and burst all in one, the burst being available if you do Fred Spin 4 this thing. Thank you Esku for being desperate enough to need to do this at some point during Worst Team Railways. Roseate Desire is next, mostly for pink ribbons. That passive is excessively strong, and the ego is super easy to fuel in this team. Next would be Tidal Elegy. This one is more of a luxury affair, and while it meets our bind requirements and applies Tremor, It's more of a luxury due to its resource demands. We could slap Christmas Nightmare there too, but the passive is not quite as useful this time, since we're leaning heavier into the bleed side of things rather than Tremor. Last is Blind Obsession. This thing is just pure damage and stim for Gregor. We get +2 pierce power, and of course +2 damage out of this. Regardless of all the above, these two are just really nice to have on board. On the other hand, we could have instead run the two per quads here. While they hurt the Lost Resonance agenda, they do potentially provide Gregor an assist attack, provide damage buffs, and some SP manipulation. But their status application is wanting, as both IDs are very scatterbrained as to how they even want to apply their relevant statuses. Notably, Ishmael has next to no count, and Heathcliff needs poise to get the most out of its application. Since we don't have anyone else who heavily capitalizes off of poise, I find it would be best to go with the Kurokomo duo above instead. Past the two leaders outlined above, we are of course going to take Kurokomo Hongers, literally for his bench passive, which is uninteresting slop. One ally with the fastest speed inflicts more bleed. It's good on 6 out of 7 of our fielded allies, so it's a no-brain pick in this case. Now for a rather controversial package. The N-Corp Fanatics. We're bringing in Faust and Don. We are going to absolutely abuse Whispers for sanity, as well as Nails to fix a lot of our potency problems. Faust rolls really low most of the time. She has no coin power conditionals or any way of really raising her damage. However, as a supporting unit, she provides an insane amount of sanity, as well as a lot of useful debuffs. First to outline would be N-Corp's Nails. This is a unique bleed that gives us counts and a little potency. By having both these units on board, we are going to get these stacked rather high on single targets, and a decent amount applied otherwise. Faust's S1 has an odd SP dip on Clash Win, which does enable a passive for us later. The S2 is most important, however. This applies shockingly useful debuffs for the following turn, that being a stack of paralysis and more importantly Gaze. Gaze is one of the few proper damage multipliers in Limbus Company, rather than being an additive multiplier that has diminishing returns. While it only applies to blunt and pierce damage, that is all we need to stim Gregor's damage up substantially. Now, if we can activate her S3 conditionals, we are providing more damage via pierce damage up, as well as giving out a burst of sanity as well. While this added burst isn't the easiest to activate, it is still a consideration whenever it is available. Regardless, her entire kit provides Nails, letting us rack up bleed. As for Dawn, she's quite terrible really. But in this specific case is very useful. For one, she provides Nails like Faust, but most importantly, she provides quite a lot of tremor counts when specific conditionals are met. So long as there are Nails in the target, she applies +1 more counts with her skills. This makes her S3 apply 4 counts on use. Since there's no clash related conditionals on it, we can of course just use this unopposed on bosses to get a lot of value out of it. Couple that with her S2 not reducing tremor counts on use, and she's actually a tremor positive unit. She also has some additional conditionals regarding the Fanatic status, that of which thanks to Faust is rather easy to obtain through Whispers. We do need to place her early in deployment to ensure it lands on her though. With Fanatic, she provides more Nails, which means more count. This is 3 Nails on her S1 and 6 Nails on her S3. Overall, this is quite a lot of free count to go applying. Anyhow, both these Sinners provide some very notable egos. Faust gives us Fluid Sac and Everlasting. Fluid Sac is even more SP recovery as well as healing when required, while Everlasting is Tremor's Boogeyman. This stupid ego provides a dumb amount of count and potency as well as Tremor Everlasting. This white Tremor Soul makes bursts have a chance to multiply every time they trigger. This makes this high priority to land first where possible on turns where we are looking to pay off Tremor. Here, it's kinda just nice to have since Tremor isn't our main focus. However, with the sheer amount of access we have to both Bind and Haste, we can actually fulfill this thing's speed-based conditional with ease, which I won't lie is rather unusual to consider. If we somehow get to such a sheer amount of bleed and Tremor that needs to be run through, we can slot this in and profit. Lucky for us, Faust is actually one of our faster IDs here too, having a base of 4 to 7. As for Dawn, we're mostly staring at Wishing Khan. The bleed count and Tremor can smoothen out status application, and the Paralyze just lets us win clashes easier. Not really a priority to use, but it may come in clutch during specific occasions. Don's slow speed can also make it rather difficult to capitalize off of during the current turn. Therefore, this thing is mostly just a status stick. Now that all the on-field units are covered, we've got a few riding the bench. First is Rodnia. We are using LCB Rodnia. Her passive is generically good, granting damage to whoever has the highest HP at a given moment. In most cases, this will just be Heathcliff, but depending on how damage gets spread out, it could be on anyone else as well. The high amount of Wrath is not too bad to fuel, due to the rest of the IDs we have on board, especially Heathcliff. Second, we're looking at Mexiclaire. Since we have the Painter, we'll randomly be proccing Sinking and reducing SP enough for this passive to be usable. Faust also has some ways of reducing SP. While we don't really have to dip too hard to enable this passive, we do have ways if required. The steep cost also means that in terms of opportunity cost, it's not particularly amazing. However, it is still usable in cases where we can either build up a lot of resources, make use of Contempt Ore, or otherwise manage to generate Gloom via external effects. Regardless, there's not too many great Sinclair support passives we can make use of here. As for Massault, we can make use of the Middle Little Brother or Sync Massault. Middle Massault is more set and forget for some easy SP recovery. Since we have a trio and pair respectively, they can get a little bump in SP. As for the live streamer, we do have enough pride to occasionally activate his passive, and doing so may grant us some nice haste when required. It is a bit restrictive, however, as it does require a clash win from the fastest. Last is very straightforward. While there was a permutation where I'd bring Ring Otis instead, we're going to make use of BL Otis. The passive is a huge damage buff against enemies under 25% HP. Since Mercy procs on targets with 20% or less HP, it is a direct buff to Gregor's kits, so we can get quite a lot of return from this passive too. With all the IDs out of the way, we can consider play pattern. First thing to consider is whether or not we need to underslot for the encounter. If the fight is going to be a focused encounter, we can cut ourselves down to 6 Sinners instead of 7. As long as Gregor is then placed in the first slots, we can give him 2 skill slots per turn instead of 1, which speeds up his application of wounds. Here we can pick whom's to drop. In most cases, it'll be the Painter, since the man mostly just provides damage instead of utility like the rest. Underslotting for Gregor means that he'll be providing up to 2 times more damage from his kit. Regardless, even if you do underslots, you won't be able to activate Fatal Wounds until turn 3, and can only benefit from its upsides on turn 4 to 6 before needing to loop it again. By underslotting for him, you make the post-turn 6 loop more consistent, as you will only need a single turn to convert open wounds to deep wounds, and a second turn to convert it to fatal once again. Anyhow, with that in mind, we're aiming to get a few things online during this free turn build-up. First, we need to get his passive up and running. This means using at least 2 sloth skills and 2 lust skills to activate this. It should be relatively easy between his S1 and the Painter's S3, but if required, we can instead make use of Ryoshu's defense skill to ensure we get the sloth. Alternatively, we can of course use 2 S1s in a row from Gregor. Lust on the other hand should be exceedingly easy to get, and we should be aiming to hit a resin of 4 lust whenever it is available to us. This will trigger Whispers and give us a lot of SP as well as Fanatic to Don, allowing her to actually clash when required. Past there, we're aiming to hit our coin power conditionals. This means carefully managing bleed counts through nails, and being less greedy with triggering Tremor Bursts until we reach Fatal Wound status. Once we get to the Fatal Wound turns, we're looking to get ourselves as far forward as possible in terms of bleed count. This means getting at least 2 Tremor Bursts per turn during turns 4 to 6 as Fatal Wounds ticks downwards. Functionally, this is 4 additional bleed count per turn so long as we get those bursts. S3 gets us 2 bursts as long as it wins a clash, while S2 only gets a single burst on that clash win, meaning we're more than likely going to have to make up for the bursts using other Sinners. Ryoshu can offer us 1 on S2 and 1 on S3 as well. Dawn has 1 for free on her S2. Meanwhile, if we really need to go hard on it, we can hit the Everlasting button to make up for all the bursts, as well as getting plenty of hemorrhage damage as required. When the first loop is done, we will have enough resources to activate some more quality of life egos and make use of our lead to keep stacking status effects up. Most fights are usually over by this stage, but if we have to continue, we can start stacking up the wounds again. It'll take 2 to 3 turns before repeating the burst phase once again. Once we hit 20% HP or below though, we can adjust our strategy a decent bit thanks to the way Gregor's defensive skill works. If we're looking to proc Mercy as many times as possible, we can substitute an S1 for a defensive skill in order to proc Mercy twice off of allies instead of needing to use the S2 or S3. This helps us with consistency, allowing us to contribute more damage than otherwise using an S1 on its own. As Mercy gets more coin power on lower HP targets as well as execution damage, it slowly outpaces S1 in terms of usefulness. More useful as well is the fact that it doesn't proc defensive skills and always hits unopposed, making for a more guaranteed source of damage. Beyond the loops and adjustments, we can find space for one ego for Gregor to use. Unfortunately, this is Unbrilliant Glory once again. This time we're getting quite a lot of value from the Tremor application and some nice to haves from Man in the Scabbard. Outside of the luxuries of Unbrilliant Glory, we can look to Christmas Nightmare or Garden of Thorns. Both of those feel significantly lower value to use than any of his base skills whenever we're in a burst phase, and feel like a waste when trying to build up to a burst phase. Regardless of which patterns we need to follow, as long as Gregor can inch in damage, he's giving us plenty of returns through Mercy, Bleed Count, Bind, and Tremor Hemorrhage. While this team may admittedly feel old and not as shiny as some of the newer toys we've been given in Bleed, there's plenty of synergies that we can muster here still. Even an ID touted as useless like Encorp Don can shine brightly once in a while. Now, I swear I'm not going off meta on purpose, it's just that the aim of most of these videos is getting 100% out of an ID's kits, even to our own detriment. In this particular case though, we were able to get plenty of returns out of old stuff, quite a lot of which you may have lying around so long as you've been playing recently. Heck, stuff that you may have gotten off banner that may just be sitting in the back due to not being all too relevant at the time. Limbus is the kind of game where, after you've been around for one season, you can reasonably obtain most pieces that you'd like to work with. And if you play long enough or diligently enough, it's something of a collector's dream, where everything is possible to collect. Outside of the Arknight egos at least. Those are probably never coming back due to licensing reasons. You don't have to be someone who's played since day one to have it all, and while it does certainly help to have done so, it's not essential. Heck, if you're not a meta chaser and are willing to play slower, or with the oddballs that you've obtained at random, you can even find a home for an off-meta setup like this one. Again, alrighty. There was plenty of fell bullet propaganda in the previous video. That was only the half of it. Welcome to the actual fell bullet propaganda, specifically that your sinners' lives are resources for damage. Now typically most fights in Limbus are easy enough for you to not lose any sinner. What if they happen to take enough chip damage to line them up for a finisher? Well, if they happen to be Pierce Fatal and can become Pride Fatal too, you can charge up Yisung's Fell Bullet Ego and put a round through them and into the enemy. Even better if you can at least get him to 13 poise and enough resonance to max out his Torn Memory on use. This will guarantee that the bullet is a crit, as well as applying the maximum damage increase to the first coin to secure an ally kill. Upon dooming your teammate, you get a whole host of benefits. Free poise to Yisung and 2 other sinners, 2 ego resources based on who was smoked, and of course AoE damage to everyone else who was involved. Oh, and that damage is also further boosted by Torn Memory and critical damage per stack. Now, if you fail to kill your buddy, only one target randomly gets plinked by the ricochet. Sometimes that's all you need, but usually you've got better options at that point. As a he ego, it has a reasonably hefty cost. 2 Wrath and 6 Pride, but overall, more than fuelable if you design your team around having enough Pride to fire it off. The Corrosion, on the other hand, offers some extra heft to the weight of the bullets. For 50% more resources, you can overclock this ego to instead gain far more damage conditionals. The performance of this ego goes up dramatically, increasing the damage of the first coin by poise, Torn Memory, and crits, as well as upping the ego resource return. We also get 4 poise back to boots for Yisung and 3 other allies instead. Past there, the second coin has more critical damage based on Torn Memory once again. All of the above makes this a very hard-hitting ego when you line up all its easy-to-meet conditionals. That is, if the content was hard enough to actually warrant using this thing a majority of the time. In more difficult content, where we can expect our sinners to lose clashes and tank more hits, the value of this ego goes upwards, but as most units perform subpar when damaged or when continuously losing clashes, there isn't many instances where this thing can see its full potential. Outside of really high MD floors or railway, I haven't found too much use for this thing. It's flashy, it's cool, it has that nice Exodia style payoff when you entirely design around it, but it is far from actually practical when used as your main source of damage or staple consideration. With a bit of an asterisk. What if we don't actually consider the lives of our sinners valuable? What if we deliberately play subpar, either taking those losing clashes or deliberately getting injured? Is the payoff from running this ego alone worth it? Still no, the amount of damage that gets made up by this ego does not justify team building alone. The content is just not hard enough. So is there even a way of salvaging it, making it our staple game plan? Well, kinda. And that falls in line with a few core staples in making a Fel Bullet team. First, we must talk about our boy failure, Fel Bullet's Mr. Gubo Yi-sung. Compared to his story counterpart, this guy actually aura farms and dishes out a tremendous amount of damage when allowed to kill off an ally. On top of that, they also have synergy with the Fel Bullet ego, changing the consumption of Torn Memory to nil when used. Rather than losing all Torn Memory after ego use, they instead retain all of it, which then allows the ID to fire off an S3 against one of their allies the following turn immediately. In the event that multiple allies are lined up for the slaughter, Fel Bullet Yi-sung can start rolling them over back to back with impunity. As he doesn't lose the Torn Memory stacks upon using his ego, he could even double or triple spam the ego, SP and resources willing. It also means he will keep gaining poise as he kills more allies, since the ego and his S3 both offer the same pre-attack poise gain. Unfortunately though, if he does use his S3, all Torn Memory stacks will be lost and will need to build them up from the start again. Wait, he can build them up? Yes. Yes, he can. In addition to sourcing them through his ego, he can also gain Torn Memory for the use of his S1 and S2. Both of them offer some okay benefit from landing them. S1 offers a Torn Memory for using it, and an additional one for critting with it. It also gives free poise counts and inflicts 1 bleed count, has a bunch of coin power conditionals, and more damage based on Torn Memory. S2 is mostly the same, offering an identical coin power conditional as well as added damage from Torn Memory. The main difference here is the skill aims to amp up both poise and bleed potency instead, rather than counts. It also offers up to 3 Torn Memory provided you can crit on its unbreakable coin. Why this one has an unbreakable coin, I honestly couldn't tell you. Odds are guns is just supposed to be that hard to stop or something. Anyhow, the main star of his kit still lies with the S3. As outlined previously, it eats all your Torn Memory and doesn't give it back. It also doesn't gain Torn Memory before use, so beware of that if you ever intend on replacing skills in MD. However, in return for eating all of your stacks, it amps damage up considerably. First off, it has a bunch of poise-based coin power conditionals. It pays to actually build up both count and potency in this case. And of course, it gains attack weight based on Torn Memory stacks. As Torn Memory maxes out at 7, we can only gain 2 attack weight this way, focusing all the damage on 1 friendly unit and 3 sub-targets should we have 7 Torn Memory at the ready. First coin has some cool gimmicks we can play around. If the target is an ally, we can ignore their pierce resistance. It gets set as fatal for this attack. We also amp the damage significantly through Torn Memory. Each poise potency also ups our crit damage as well. As for the second coin, much like the first, it also just ricochets if we don't kill our ally with it. However, if we do land a kill, all the sub-targets will be in for an extreme amount of damage, as killing an ally doubles the bonus from Torn Memory, almost tripling the damage from the second coin. It further amps itself up, poise and Torn Memory as well. On top of all of that, the healthier the target we manage to kill, the more damage we're stacking on top. While this last bonus is rather impractical to have functioning to 100%, throwing a low-level ID into the Fel Bullet grinder is a consideration to make thanks to this bonus. Aside from that, it just inflicts some bleed potency and counts if we're successful in killing the mate. Now compared to the ego, we can make use of this S3 without killing any allies. It turns into a boring single target attack that deals very little damage. Despite involving a bunch of extra enemies for its attack weights, it does not inflict any damage to them. Last of course is their defense skill, the clashable counter. We get very consistent gains out of it, that being a guarantee of 2 Torn Memory and on a successful hit, 2 poise potency and counts. It's also a pride skill, letting us generate resources as required for his passive and of course ego. His always active passive revolves around Torn Memory, making him lose and gain the equivalent number of stacks every turn. This makes it so he doesn't just lose all of his stacks from skills every single turn. The wording of his S3, unfortunately, makes it so that he doesn't gain back the Torn Memory eaten by his S3, as the timing has him losing the stacks before the end of turn. The resource-intensive passive, on the other hand, is all centered around friendly fire. If he manages to kill someone, he gets a unique buff that increases critical damage, lets him inflict more bleed, and of course, snowballs his kills by giving him poise potency and count on kill. This is an extremely powerful effect. However, it only lasts a turn, so make sure you have some way of following it up. Whether it be another ego use, to chain the murders of fellow sinners, or gunning down of other enemies via his other skills. Most notable part of this passive, however, is the regain of Torn Memory after making use of his ego. Compared to Magic Bullet Otis, who uses their ego to gain bullets, This is much the same. Of course though, using it at 7 to 1 memory doesn't instantly kill the user, as funny as that would be. All that in mind, we've got a few considerations in making a Fell Bullet team. First off, they are no doubt supposed to be our damage dealer. They exist to hit hard and otherwise provide little to no utility to the team. If anything, the team shooting in most cases would be considered detrimental outside of cases where taking damage is ideal, or otherwise grants buffs to the one taking damage. To this end, we have 2 possible options open to us that I'd like to propose. We'll be exploring a specific one for this video, but I'll give a brief outline of both of them nonetheless. First off is the Bloise team. This is short for Bleed and Poise. By making use of both status effects, we can get a very powerful engine going through IDs like the Bequad, Chi Faust, Twin Hook Gregor, and Kurokuma Rodya. This allows us to build up a significant amount of poise on our allies, as well as bleed on enemies. However, this setup isn't the most practical, and has a lot of gimmicks to look out for. Specifically, you'd be aiming to get Captain Ish's many gimmicks functional, as well as trying to land Sky Clearing Cut with Rodya. There isn't too much in the way of consistent bleed counts, leaving a little bit to be desired from this setup outside of MD. Inside of MD, we can eliminate a majority of Bloise's issues. We can also double dip with a lot of ego gifts, allowing us an exceedingly powerful and souped up team for the later floors. Heck, we don't even really have to run Fell Bullet Yi-Sung, as we would just be able to run the full Bequad trio in this particular case, and instead profit off of relentless stabbing, rather than going through all the loops and hoops to make an ally explode. Also, since we want those IDs to live, we aren't going to kill any of them outside of Desperation Strikes either. So what of our alternative option? Well, please welcome in the Kurokuma clan. These guys run as a team of 3 or more Kurokuma clan members, all sporting funny tattoos that further enhance their capabilities. Typically, Heathcliff and Ishmael are the 2 staples, as they gain benefits from other Kurokuma clan members existing on the field. But most importantly, they gain benefits from letting other Kurokuma clan members kick the bucket. In the case of both Ishmael and Heathcliff, they both get slash power up for the encounter when a Kurokuma clan member dies. Once 3 of them die, however, they get access to the battle ready status. This further boosts their slash power by 1, and gives them free slash damage on top of granting them more bleed application, as well as bleed count. Plus, the whole idea behind this composition is to set up Kurokuma members besides Heathcliff and Ishmael to die via Fell Bullet, upon doing so giving us access to some ridiculous benefits. This particular composition I do like more than the Bloise one, as there is a stronger feeling of team cohesion, and everyone benefits off of each other in some way or another. Some more than others, admittedly. Anyhow, since I'll be going with the Kurokuma clan composition, let's talk shop about our staples. We can run anywhere between 3 to 6 members of the Kurokuma clan for the full breadth of benefits available to us. However, in this particular case, I would like to run 5 of them. On field, we can expect to run Ishmael, Heathcliff, Rodya, Gregor, and Hongers. Our aim will be to let the latter 3 lower their HP through various gimmicks. Let's explore the main ways we are going to get that to happen. Kurokuma clan captain Ishmael is a team leader style ID. Much like Bamboo Hatted Kim, Lord Hongers, and Manager Don, Ishmael enhances and takes advantage of the other IDs in her faction. In card game terminology, we're making use of a tribal deck base, our tribe of course being the Kurokuma. Ishmael benefits the team by providing them damage up on her S2, defense power up on her defensive, and most importantly, Dark Cloud through her passive. For a Lust Resin of 3, she provides Dark Cloud to her adjacent dashboard clan members, and for 4 Resin, she applies it to all of the members regardless of speed. Dark Cloud allows us to full send on every turn with a Lust Resin, regardless of whether or not we have the clashing power or the stagger threshold to take a hit. Why? Because it grants us unbreakable coins. Wait, but those can still be staggered out of, not these ones. The unbreakables granted by Dark Cloud will always go off due to preventing damage from staggering the ID using them until the skill ends. It also grants +3 final power to skills that lost clashes as well as upping bleed effects. This is what we're going to use as a means of reckless abandon. So long as Ishmael is on the field, and so long as we can get a Lust Resin of 3 to 4 going, we can abuse Dark Cloud to make our IDs full senders, regardless of whether or not it's a particularly good idea. We can use this to take clashes they're not supposed to win, soak damage meant for Yi-Sung, and eventually to lower their HP enough to place a bullet through their dome and into our enemies. This single tribal passive enables a majority of our strategy. Alright, so what else are we looking at with her? Well, access to battle ready and permanent slash power increase about sums it up. Also, she detonates bleed stacks of her S3 once things get going. Pretty useful for more damage per turn when fights go on long enough for it to pay off. Second up is Heathcliff. I'll be real specific here and call him real cunty looking. You know it, I know it, just look at those fucking shirt buttons, man. He did not have to leave them that far undone. Anyway, Heathcliff gets the same slash power up and battle ready passive as Ishmael. Also has a whole host of other useful capabilities for us riddled into his kits. Most notably is his retaliation hits. While his passive is active, whenever an ally takes damage, he'll throw over an S1 in retaliation once per turn. However, if the ally dies or is hit at 25% HP or lower, he'll throw in his defensive skill Rules of the Backstreets instead, up to twice even. This skill is very strong, being a single coin clashable counter skill usually, but he reuses this coin based on his personal buffs. If he gains Dark Cloud Blade, whether through his passive or S3, he'll reuse the coin. If he has Battle Ready, he'll reuse the coin as well. Now if he has Cumulus Wall, he'll trigger both of the coin reuse conditionals without needing to fulfill them. Plus, after an S3, he can use his counter next turn to dish out an extraordinary amount of damage. On top of that, so long as Ishmael is on the field, Rules of the Backstreets will always be unbreakable, and have a +4 final power when it breaks. Mind you, even when it does break, he can reuse the damn thing anyway, leading to some very stupid amounts of damage even when we're behind. Unfortunately, we aren't triggering this thing off of fell bullets, as funny as that would be to do so. Regardless, he's another source of ridiculous damage in this team, while dealing out a fair share of supporting counterfire. He scales up with more negative effects on target like Ishmael too, which is going to be a bonus due to how funky the next 3 IDs are going to be. The last 000 we're throwing into the mix here is Kurokuma Rodion. I'll be frank, he sucks. Her whole gimmick is to generate enough poise to use sky clearing cuts on her counter instead of on her S3. Problem being, we get her S3 in normal play anyway, and she can otherwise barely support her own poise. We have to loop her S2 into her S1 first, or find some other source of poise generation for her. Even then, the payoff is mediocre. For a single coin skill, it rolls damn high, but it's from such a long time ago that it just doesn't hit like it's supposed to. While the supporting effects from Ishmael could lend a hand in making things more doable, the lack of poise support in the Kurokuma lineup does make things rather awkward to get going. That being said, as Rodion, she does have access to a few tools we would like to make use of, if at all possible. Most important will be Sanguine Desire. This thing allows us to slow down the decay of bleed counts for the turn, while also doubling the bleed potency inflicted by one of Rodya's skills. If Sky Clearing Cuts ever crits, that's a clean 20 bleed right there, which while funny as fuck, is real unlikely to ever happen. We're gonna want to play her minigame for some poise, throw out a Sanguine Desire when appropriate, then continuously try to get her counter off. Because it's a classic style counter, she needs to get hit first. And the best part about needing to get hit first is that her HP lowers, and sooner rather than later, she'll be in fell bullet range. And failing fell bullet murder, she'll at least contribute in death towards her 2 betters as slash power. She is here to die, but if possible, she can at least go out with a bang rather than a whimper. Regardless, once she dies, we give an ally with the slowest speed some slash damage. As there's a lot of Kurokuma on the field, and the initial planned backup is going to be slash heavy, this works out perfectly fine. If possible, we're going to get her killed first. Next, we land in the territory of 00 IDs. These guys are going to be fodder for the bullets, but also fodder for battle ready, provided they, of course, don't overperform. First off, let's cover Kurokuma Hongers. This motherfucker can carry you through Bamboo-Hatted Kim alone. Just don't let him use his S3 or Kim will actually murder you. The whole appeal of this freak is Cloud Cutter, his S2. He exists only for Cloud Cutter, normally. In this case, we're stealing his S1 for Ishmael's Lust Resonance. But if we somehow achieve it, Cloud Cutter can also be unbreakable, and can also reuse its coins while unbreakable. Some Looney Tunes shit watching this ID slash 4 times after taking staggering damage. Aside from that, his S3 has some crazy utility if he ever manages to use it before any other IDs. It inflicts 6 bloody paralysis. Yes, 6. It's so exceedingly stupid how much this is. While this S3 doesn't roll even remotely high, it doesn't bloody matter if we've got Dark Cloud. This thing can be unbreakable. As long as Honger somehow finds a way to outspeed everyone else while using his S3, he's guaranteeing a 1 clash from someone else, provided he doesn't use it on someone with minus coins, in which case he invariably dooms everyone instead. Of course, that might just be the idea in this composition, but make sure you know what you're doing before you try to paralyze a target that has minus point skills, otherwise the wrong IDs may start kicking the bucket instead. As for egos that we want to make use of, the main consideration is Roseate Desire. This thing lets us inflict Lust Fragility, as well as having the added bonus of inflicting defense power down and defense level down. If we can ever get some Gluttony resources for Tears of Tarnished Blood going, we can all but guarantee Honger's death. The steep cost, however, makes it rather difficult to fuel in this team composition, outside of one very specific backup swap. Oh, and while dead, Honger's just gives passive slop, more bleed to the fastest sinner. Since all of them inflict bleed, it's just good regardless. As for jobber number 2, we've got Kurokuma Clan Captain Gregor. This guy's S3 animation is one of the more fun ones. He slams a bottle into his opponent before slashing them up. This presumably somehow inflicts offense level down and plus coin drop, both rather useful statuses to have. Unfortunately, he does not roll high at all, needing some rather strict conditionals for coin power and some moderate amounts for clash power. If he can go unopposed and just inflict debuffs, he'll be doing his job quite well. All the more so if he's able to do it before the rest of the team, though a few of his debuffs do linger onto the next turn as required. The most notable being attack power down on his S2, so long as the opponent has 7 or more bleed. The combination of debuffs can be quite useful for filling both Heathcliff and Ishmael's negative effect conditionals, further stemming up their damage. For egos, we have limited options. Not too many of his egos are generically good outside of Unbrilliant Glory, that of which was a limited time deal. It's the best one we could probably ask for here since its ego passive works off of allies getting hit, staggered, or killed, that of which we intend on doing in spades. The active version of it is also quite useful as it inflicts both Tremor and Burn, both of which we can abuse for the negative effect conditionals if the timing is right. Past there, Garner Fawns could see some use if we're desperately trying to keep people alive, but it is very unlikely to be utilized due to its subpar returns and costly ego resources. Also, don't use his base ego. That thing gives him protection when critically injured. We want to avoid that if possible. Once he begins riding the bench, we have access to offense level down on targets with at least 7 bleed. Inside of a Kurokumo team, this is basically a guarantee, so it's actually quite a nice support to have on the bench. All of the Kurokumo fellas out of the way, we've got a few more sinners to cover. First off is our tech choice, Encorp Ryoshu. While there could be an argument made for Kurokumo Ryoshu for the bleed count and access to Gluttony, we need Encorp Ryoshu to get the most out of Fell Bullet Yi-Sung, at least out of the identity. Encorp Ryoshu provides us several unique interactions with Yi-Sung's S3. First off, if it is targeting an ally, Ryoshu will personally go and attack them with her S1. This attack cannot kill the target and instead acts to prime them for execution via Fell Bullet. In addition, if the target ends up being Ryoshu while she has Contempt of the Gaze, she will instead redirect the bullet towards her before deflecting it to up to 4 targets nearby, based on Torn Memory stats. She can gain this effect through getting staggered, activating her defense skill and fulfilling conditionals, or through the use of Contempt Ore with at least 6 resin being the highest. All of this on its own is already really damn useful. However, if we take it a step further and make use of the ego more actively, we can generate ego resources we don't have and fuel egos we have no business using quite as often. Of course, we can generate more fuel for Fell Bullet. Anyhow, the rest of our kit revolves around Tremor Bleed, as well as inflicting stacks of Gaze. They're rather self-sufficient and selfish kits, but because of the way that it works, we can make use of all the additional negative effects. In this case, getting 2 more on top of Bleed through Tremor and Gaze specifically. He also hits like a truck when allowed to ramp up, and grants us access to some of the most powerful egos. Aside from Contempt Ore, we're going to take a real close look at Forkalgia. Ryoshu's version of Forkalgia is functionally a pocket nebulizer, that of which being one of the most powerful ego gifts in Limbus Company. Through its use, we can turn any random Pride A resin we pull off into an instant return on poise for both herself and up to 5 other allies. If possible, we would want to kill at least an enemy or an ally with its use, since with the starting lineup, we'll be dealing out poise to Yi-Sung and Rodya specifically. As Rodya is rather terrible at maintaining poise, she's bound to eat up a nebulizer stack of 1 for herself. With 2 stacks of nebulizer though, Yi-Sung will get it no matter what. Past there, if she ever ends up riding the bench, she deals out bleed count, which can be very valuable. That covers everyone we plan on fielding. However, as we're looking to have sinners die, we're going to need some pretty reliable backup. For this, I'd like to introduce the Blood Fiend package, specifically the 2 third Kindreds and Manager Don. With all of the bleed going on thanks to Kurokumo, there will inevitably be a lot of Blood Feasts to go around. This means that the moment Blood Fiends enter the picture, they are able to suck up all of the blood on the field, empowering all of their skills by a significant amount. The order they come out onto the field can be rather important as each of them has different demands and ways of ramping up accordingly. First to field would be Barbara Otis. By aggressively stacking up blood-tinged scissors, she can quickly turn into an AoE monster, as she would rapidly chew through the Blood Feast stacks to power herself up. In needing the longest time to ramp up, having her hit the field first benefits her most compared to the other 2, As she also applies suing targets, we're also able to gain more negative effect conditionals for the others to abuse. While waiting in the wings, she benefits us by healing after a kill and ramping up our bleed count upon landing kills. While the former is a bit more of a detrimental effect to our game plan, the latter does speed things up considerably for when the rest of the Blood Fiends arrive. Next to arrive should be Manager Dawn, as Dawn needs some time to ramp up as well. Having them arrive next would be appropriate. As the Blood Feast starts getting consumed by her, you can make use of the empowered S2 from Otis as well to deal rather large amounts of AoE damage. If we happen to find the need to then kill off Otis, she'll also benefit from her passive as well, gaining one more hard blood from skills once at least one La Mancha land ally has fallen. Regardless, the rest of her kit is really powerful when allowed to consume Blood Feast, that of which should have significantly built up by the time she arrives on the field. In terms of egos, we can of course abuse Yearning Mikala. If enough Blood Feast has already been consumed, it can hit like a bloody truck and even leave further after effects if we stack it up in a Lust Resin. As for her capabilities while riding the bench, the less healthy our units are, the more damage they do. In this particular case, this is bloody amazing. We're functionally getting damage for free, as long as we subject our sinners to pain, of which we most certainly are. Next is the Prince of La Mancha land Mersaults. While I'd love to be able to pair him off with Princess Rodya, we need Kurokuma Rodya to die for us instead for slash power and battle ready. This fella is hopefully the last to come in for our lineup, which means the goal would be to have 3 fell bullets go off, and hopefully no more. In general usage, Prince Mersault provides a ton of survivability, meaning that anything from here on may be significantly more difficult to kill via friendly fire. All that said, he's a slash ID that provides sustain and synergizes with Blood Feast we've built up over the course of the encounter. He can ramp up rather fast and provide a good chunk of healing while the others do so as well. Once ready to go, he can burn all of his stacks on an AoE and reset once again. Aside from that, he could just start applying bleed on the rest of the IDs and speeding up their demise. However, that's a consideration if we ever reposition him in the deployment order. Regarding egos, Mersault has his own Yearning Mikala, with differing effects to Dawn's, mostly that it wishes to inflict bleed rather than scale off a Blood Feast consumption. Rose Wedge is a rather powerful effect too, giving a whole host of benefits for the Blood Fiends and Kurokuma both. As for bench riding, his passive multiplies Blood Feast generation twice per encounter. On a turn where a lot of bleed is expected to get triggered, this effect pays major dividends and should be a huge consideration for the longer fights in the game. Last are the two we would ideally wish to never see pop out during a chain battle. First is LCB Sinclair. His support passive is Grudge. We get an attack up the turn after we fell bullet someone or send someone to their death. Can potentially be useful, as long as we slot Yi Sung in the first slot. It all but guarantees it landing on him. While a single point of attack power isn't crazy useful, it can mean the difference between winning some of the nastier clashes and not. We can of course make use of Mexiclair too, if we just want a more normal support passive. If you prefer the consistency, you can make use of them instead. Just note that when they hit the field, you're going to want to hit them with Yi Sung's S3 rather than the Fell Bullet Ego. In comparison, LCB Sinclair is a perfect one-stop shop for Fell Bullet Ego application. Regardless, if Sinclair ever arrives on the field, it is specifically to die. As for Forced, we have 2 options here. One is She Forced. If she ever arrives on the field, she will have no build up at all, and is likelier to just flop over and die after losing an arrow or 2. That being said, if you just need someone to hopefully clutch things out, she can act as a pinch hitter due to being able to ready up an arrow and go unopposed. While riding the bench, however, she doesn't provide us all too much. Our PS IDs are unlikely to be the ones outputting the most bleed until Dawn arrives, and even then, she won't always be the one triggering it. For a less wasteful pick, we can grab N-Corp Forced for Whisper. Having easy access to sanity gain is rather useful in many compositions. This one could stand to benefit as well. When she hits the field though, it'll be as a wet noodle, which honestly by then, if she can just tank some damage and become another Fell Bullet, that'll be more than enough. With all the sinners now covered, I suppose we should go over the play patterns. First to consider is Fell Bullet's poise generation. As an ID, he needs a little micromanagement to get going. His S2 specifically is a bit of a trap, as while it generates plenty of poise potency, it does little to favor your count. Instead, lead with an S1 where possible, or a counter when not. This gives you a steadier increase in poise, as the counts will be more stable. Once you can expect crits, you can then use his S2 to speed up Torn Memory generation. We ideally want to hit 7 Torn Memory and 13 poise, in order to always crit our allies with the S3. As long as you manage the count appropriately, this should pose little issue as long as you baby it for a while. That being said, we should be working towards 4 Calgear first. We're aiming for 5 Pride, 1 Wrath, and 1 Lust to be able to activate it by turn 2. If we can meet these conditions, then happy days. all of our poise issues should be solved. At least so long as we can get 2 Forcalgia stacks. Otherwise, we'll be bouncing the bonus poise between Rodya and Yisang both, which while not the worst, is less than ideal for our purposes. Past the build up for Forcalgia, we want the rest of the Kurokumo to either take fights they can barely win, or unopposed into target. This makes it so that bleed builds up without consuming quite as much counts, and the Kurokumo themselves get injured and lower their HP to fell bullet levels. We only want to do this to Gregor, Hongers, and Rodya if possible. Whenever we can get a 4 Lust Resin for those Unbreakables, we can abuse those too. Do note that anytime we line up a 5+ Resin of Lust, we are activating Prince Mersault's passive and multiplying Blood Feast for that turn. We can only do that twice. So save it for an Ishmael nuke and turns where clashes are bound to result in bleeding. A good turn for it may involve Sanguine Desire as well to keep the bleed count from dying even faster. As the turns drag along, a Kurokumo ID should be hitting breaking points. If one isn't for an extended period of time, line up a Contempt Ore as well as a Yisang S3 for the following turn. On the following turn, we can use Yisang's S3 on Roshu instead, for the reflection damage. From there, we can keep cycling until we see an opportunity to kill one of our own. As friendlies drop in HP, we're going to want to ready either the Ego or S3 for the kill. On Gregor specifically, we're going to want to use the S3 as he is pierce resistant, starting at ineffective, thus making the Ego have a more difficult time killing him. The same goes for the other two, albeit they are neutral to the damage instead, and can still be fodder for the Ego as required. Regardless of which you pick, as long as you land the kill, the outgoing damage will be substantial and a Blood Fiend will switch in to soak up all of the accumulated Blood Feast. Otis makes a good pick for any encounter that requires AoEs, Mersault works for anything that requires sustain, and Don is overall okay, but should come in after one of the other two ideally. Now when all 3 Blood Fiends are on the field, Battle Ready should also be active for the Kurokumo duo. At this point we can look to spam Lust Resonance and Egos, fishing for damage accordingly. If the encounter keeps dragging on, we can dust off the rifle once more and finish off anyone who seems to be dying. As the nukes run their course, the encounter should wrap up. If it somehow keeps going on, you're probably on floor 11 plus of MD at that point and are facing adversities beyond your reckoning or just picked something wrong at some point. Anyhow, that about sums up how I decided to run this guy. Functionally, it's a guy with a questionably Japanese gun, with a Lienfield in his pockets, plus his Chinese-Japanese partner in crime coming over to shoot up a syndicate. Oh, and there's vampires here too. All in all, it sounds like a B-grade movie or a really starved for ideas anime. There's plenty of synergies that are definitely overkill for a majority of content in this game, or strategies that only scale better in more difficult content. This is one of them. A really fun one that makes full use of the game's battle mechanics, specifically the need for backup units in chain battles, and comes with the expectation that you are willing to take damage accordingly. I implore you to not turn your nose up at strategies that can capitalize on sinners' deaths and washed up IDs. You'd be doing a disservice to the game's design at this point, limiting design space because you keep trying to fit a square peg into a circle hole, or eats one of the 7 status crayons. Consider solutions outside of the meta box. Ways of building that don't have to consult some fella's guide like my own to affirm your own beliefs. Besides that... Alrighty. The Pequod Captain Ishmael is an overloaded as hell kit. He has faction-specific effects, resonance effects, on-kill effects, on stagger effects, on-resonance, on-kill effects, aggro, bleed, poise, burn, coin power conditionals, preferred enemy, protection, defense level up, offense level up, unit adjacency bonuses, assist attack, pride power, damage up, execution damage, sanity manipulation, pierce power up, and a personal buff. And a special sanity loss / gain condition. Right, that thing does exist. As for where all of these come from, the S1 is on the defensive side, provisioning protection, defense level up, and aggro. Comfortable to use on teams that require a more defense-oriented approach to build up their payoffs. Skill 2, on the other hand, is a unique call and response style affair, where after it resolves, per resin of the highest, there's a 20% chance for the ally that goes after her to then follow up with an attack. You can guarantee this assist attack with at least 5 sin resonance. It also provides damage buffs to the ally and offense level to those adjacent, making it a rather potent stim. As for skill 3, she spins like mad for 4 coins, and if she kills or staggers by the end, she provides poison sanity to up to 4 others based on resonance. This one needs 6 absolute resonance to get the full effect. Thankfully, we can field 7 sinners these days, making that significantly easier to achieve. This is also her only skill that actually gains any coin power. Last is her defensive skill. She has less defense level than quite a lot of other IDs. Might be the peg leg. But she can heal the allies next to her on the dashboard for 5 SP each. Twice. Nice to have in an emergency, or for a top-up during downtime phases as required. With the passive, we have Captain's Orders. which requires free resonance of Pride. It doesn't do anything unless she kills something. However, should she manage to pull it off, we get Poise Potency and Count, as well as an SP heal to 2 other allies, Pierce Power Up and Sanity for the quads, and for herself the ability to burn with every coin. For sanity purposes, she actually doesn't mind seeing her allies die. In fact, she gains 10 sanity when it happens. Now, if someone else kills something that's higher level than her, she gets pissed and loses 5 sanity, unless it was by her order. All that said, we're going to build a team that can activate every single one of these, and make use of them some way or another. Despite how ridiculous her kit is, she's actually not a particularly amazing combatant herself. Outside of MD, she is far from a one-man army. Instead, she is one of the single best buff support units in the game. Almost everything listed above does not apply to her personally, but instead applies to her allies. Therefore, we need to find allies that 1. Benefits from the above listed effects, 2. Assist in reaching the conditionals for triggering the effects, and 3. Have the appropriate sin affinities to line up all the resonance effects. Some other key ideas to focus on lie in her resonance capabilities, granting an assist attack by her S2, meaning some units with good S1s or S1s that allow them to ramp up faster benefit most. This favors counterpliers as well as charge and poise build-up offered by such. A lot more modern IDs have some kind of benefit from making use of their S1 as well. Outside of that, S1s with important or less readily available sin affinities help fuel egos and passives too. Her own S1 allows tanks to take more aggro and gain increased survivability. You're going to want to find IDs with either strong defensive skills or defensive skills that can benefit greatly from increased defense power. That, and if they match the main sin affinity that we're after, we'll have an easier time assembling resonance chains. Lastly, her S3 targets more allies with its buffs, based on the highest absolute resonance on the board. This caps out at 4, meaning so long as we get a full resonance going, we should be golden to get the skill up and running. That said, the skill itself does need to land a staggering or death blow to see its full benefits come to life. To that end, for our deck building, we're going to need to pick a sin affinity as our secondary basis. Considering that our star this time is Pequod Captain Ishmael, we should realistically explore the sins of Envy, Pride, and Wrath, as these 3 come with her kit. While the others are still available to us, the lack of Gluttony, Lust, Gloom, and Sloth in her base kit make it harder to justify, since she would effectively brick the resonance if she is not at the extreme end of either range of speeds. Couple that and the fact a good chunk of her kit is contingent on whomst is adjacent to her, and the aforementioned 4 sin affinities become increasingly less ideal. To that end, let's look at the kinds of things provisioned by each of the affinities we can base around. The Wrath Resonance team is centered around burn IDs for the most part. Many of the IDs that fit nicely on Wrath have shown up on this channel at some point or another. That being said, not many of them see amazing returns from Captain Ishmael. Regardless, IDs to look out for in Wrath Resonance are Liu Yisung, LCE Faust, Think Easton, Liu Roshu, Liu Rodya, and Firefist Gregor. The main appeal here would be the sanity battery offered by Liu Yisung, as well as the easy to handle and straightforward burn conditionals available to the rest of the cast. A good chunk of the team are Liu fixers after all. They're supposed to be, good at group combat and all that. We can make use of about half her kits on a Wrath Resonance team. It's not the worst to be placed on one. However, I think we can do better. Next would be a Pride Resonance team. Most of the IDs centered around Pride can also be found sporting Poise. To this end, we can provide some modicum of Poise through her passive, since so long as she lands the finishing blow on an enemy, the team receives Poise. She also awards Poise on kill with her S3, showering 4 other team members with Poise and SP. Plus, we can do some funny double dipping with Pride. As long as a Pride Resonance of 3 can be achieved outside of Captain Ishmael, if her S3 manages to kill an enemy, we get both the benefits of the Captain's orders and her S3. This causes a sudden spike of 17 SP and an ungodly amount of Poise, and Poise count, to be dealt out to the rest of the team. Plus, who may see the benefits of such a build? Well, the easy answers are any part of the Blade lineage, and of course her own Pequod crewmates. Couple this with Gimsalt's own resonance benefits, and we're a formidable contender for the topic of today's video. However, the last hat to throw into the ring I find to be the most compelling by far. Envy has a ridiculous amount of options. Quite a few of the IDs here are also based around securing an Envy resonance to function to their fullest. Unfortunately, this is also Captain Ish's S1. While she'll be able to line up the chains far easier with Envy as the basis, the stronger parts of her kit will feel a little hamstringed in comparison. That is until you realize that most of the conditionals are not looking for absolute resonance, but only regular resonances. Resonances that she doesn't necessarily have to be a part of either. Since Envy has a stupid amount of IDs that either rock Envy defense skills or hugely benefits from securing resonances, this will be our go-to choice for the build. Couple all of that with the easy to fuel egos that hugely benefit from Envy Resonance teams, and we have a winner. Unfortunately, there's a very specific downside here. A lot of the better Envy IDs are charge IDs. While they're not all outright hostile to one another, we are going to have to pick and choose some favorites to make things function. That being said, I believe Envy to be by far the most flexible of all of them. We don't necessarily have all too many staples. If I had to name just one fella that I believe has to be on the team no matter what, that would be Middle Sinclair. This needlessly buffed twink benefits greatly from Envy resonance chains. S2 and S3 gain offense level based on resonance, doubling in effect should it be an absolute resonance. This bloody stacks up on top of the regular benefits of Resonance 2, dimming this twink up beyond belief. Arguably, we should include some of the other middle IDs too, but I'll cover those when they come up for each individual sinner, since there's a lot of options here that I'm going to need to cover before selecting my personal favorites. Anyhow, the most unique part of Middle Sinclair is the way that his defensive skill functions. Should Envy A Resonance hit certain thresholds, instead of a generic counter, he instead uses S2 at 4 resin and S3 at 6 resin. If you recall, Captain Ish's S1 applies defense level, so that thing is getting souped up to an insane extent should she be involved in that A resin as well. Cutting to all of that, and we get his passive proccing off of an exceedingly cheap free Envy resources. This passive places vendetta marks on opponents that land hits on him and other IDs. With the increasingly common advent of unbreakable coins, this is quite an easy condition to fulfill now. Upon striking a target with these stats, he converts them into Book of Vengeance stats, racking up his damage and clashing significantly. All that to say, the middle little brother Sinclair meets every last one of the conditionals we're after. Alright, and his S1 gives him some SP back. The assist attack nets us gluttony resources as well as some SP for the fella. If the target happens to have marks, more vengeance stacks too. His was one of the meatiest to discuss out of the frontliners, thus we arrive at one of the least meaty, Faust, who has two appealing options. One of them is N-Corp Faust, the other is Multi-Crack Faust. N-Corp Faust provides sanity heals, an NVS1, blunt and pierce damage ups, and of course some bleed support with nails. Now, if we are trying to make a bleed lust team, it would be a no-brainer. But to get the most out of her kit, she needs to do some counterintuitive things to our needs. 1. She needs to achieve a Lust Resonance of 4 to proc whistles for her SP healing. This takes 4 slots away from us that could be going towards other resonances, which is not ideal. On top of that, the damage buff conditionals need her to land a kill for lesser bonuses than we'd receive giving Captain Ishmael that kill. Plus, her inclusion would give rise to infighting for best use case scenarios. It is a bit of a shame though, since apparently Gaze is one of the only sources of multiplicative damage in Limbus Company. Regardless, as we aren't strictly here for bleed either, we'll be exploring our other option in Multi-Crack Force. First off, she is rather self-sufficient as she is a charge ID. Airdropping her into any composition works perfectly fine. She doesn't strictly need synergies to work, but in this particular case she provides us a very reliable source of envy. Her defense skill is an envy skill. Plus, at any time in which we need an envy resin to function or activate our conditionals, we can substitute any of her other skills with a defensive skill to provide it on demand. Aside from that, she can fuel Fluid Sac by herself, which is an amazing upside due to the available healing and SP. She also has access to Hex now, giving us access to Envy Fragility, Nails, Curse, and Pierce Fragility at bargain bin prices, needing only 6 Envy to execute and 9 to overclock, that of which we will have in abundant supply. As for her S1, it isn't the sort that provides us anything crazy unique. However, it does give us Lust resources, of which, due to a lot of my later picks, will be a little on the scarcer side. Captain Ishmael's assist attack will thus allow us to speed up Lust's resource generation, should she be chosen as the assist attacker. Next, we have our token Pequod member. We are going to make use of Pequod first mate Yisang. Out of the 2 available ones besides Ishmael, Yisang is arguably the more useful one here. His S2 is our source of envy here. It does make it a little rougher to achieve the full envy resonance chains. However, it potentially rolls 5 coins based on whether or not he crits. As there are multiple conditionals that speed up poise generation through Pequod Ishmael, we can more reliably build up poise to give him access to this damage nuke. As a member of the Pequod, he benefits most from Captain Ishmael's passive, that being an additional 5 SP and some PS power up. Now his inclusion also allows us to more reliably access Captain's orders, since he has pride on his S1. He will more likely than not be the one helping Ishmael trigger a passive skill. S1 also has some nice benefits tied to them, most notably inflicting bind for the next turn as well as upping his poise count. Another thing to consider with Yi-Sung here is his access to Fell Bullet. Most of the IDs I'm picking for frontlining are PS Fatal. To boot, a good chunk of them have ways of also making themselves Pride Fatal for easily fueled egos. From here, I'll be detailing if the ID is a good Fell Bullet target as well, but for the previous aforementioned two, Middle Sinclair is PS Fatal and Pride Fatal. The only ego he'd touch is Hex Nail, which turns him into a Pride Neutral unfortunately. But since most of Sinclair's power budget is centered around his IDs, it isn't the most likely to come out. In comparison, Multicrack Faust is PS Fatal and gains Pride Fatality on both of her most commonly used egos here, those being Hex Nail and Fluid Sac, making both of these IDs convincing targets should either of them be at risk of death. With 4 IDs now on the field, I'd like to talk about our first package deal. This will be the W Core package. There is one ID here that will remain stable to our game plan, while the other will be substituted in according to our needs. First up is our staple, that being W Corp L4 Cleanup Agent, CCA Heathcliff. Yes, we are taking him over Pequod Heathcliff. While Pequod Heathcliff has 2 skills of Envy Affinity, they are his S2 and S3, meaning only half of his kit makes up for our needs. While he then also gains the Pequod bonuses and benefits more greatly from Poise. He loses out due to one simple factor. His defense skill is not Envy. Now shiny new Heathcliff has just that, an on-demand Envy solution. He will also be our tankiest ID by far, with a huge variety of survivability options, as well as shielding and very reliable access to his S3, that of which is also Envy. Inside of this team, he will be abusing his Envy skills, but also using his other skills to generate ego resources for us. Anyhow, his most notable and defining feature here will be his defensive skill. It's a clashable guard that gives him a unique status effect that renders him immobile for a range of benefits on the immobile turn, as well as the following turn after. Particularly strong is removing his first stagger threshold, as this will prevent him from getting stagger looped. In Envy res with Captain Ishmael, he'll receive the full brunt of the aggro stacks from her S1's Resonance, as well as, provided an A Reson of 4+, receive a stack of protection, further increasing his durability. His orb guarantees his ability to tank for that turn. Essentially, this guy is built like a brick shithouse, and we are going to abuse the ever-living fuck out of that fact. Alright, he also hits really hard with his S3 once it's built up. Once it is, it's an unbreakable too. We'll get to him one of these days. I really like this dude. Aside from that, all 4 of the egos we're using with him are exceedingly good. Body Sack gives him a range of strong benefits, with the passive allowing him to double dip whenever Ishmael scores a kill. Aside from that, AEDD allows him to go faster for a turn, as well as providing even more tankiness via the consumption of charge. Strangely, that does benefit him, as having less charge count will allow us to access Overloaded more often. Past there is Telepole. This thing is a huge second turn play or an exceedingly good charge battery being boosted up by Envy Resin and leaving behind a passive that also benefits from Envy Resin. And last but not least, in any definition of the term, we've got Binds. Aside from this ego having clued me in entirely about how on the nose some of Limbus's references to the media they draw inspiration from is, see the phrase "man is born free and everywhere he is in chains" by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, this ego turns resonance teams up to 11 and beyond, specifically because of the passive effect. So long as Heathcliff is part of the Envy Resin on a given turn, and he sure as heck will be, all allies that are part of that chain are getting free offense level and free defense level. Considering we'll be hitting an A Resin of Envy quite often, we can upgrade that further to a 5 offense level and 5 defense level. This ego alone basically mandates that Heathcliff be a part of a resonance team. Anyhow, for the not as essential second half of this package, we have W Corp L3 Cleanup Captain, Otis. First off, she provides a source of pride for her S1. We'll be abusing this for Captain's orders, where appropriate, as well as using the additional pride generated to fuel ego and passives. Past there, she has an NBS2 that allows us to provide charge barrier to allies, as well as inflict bind. Lastly, to bring everything all together, she has access to the load status. This boosts the damage of any charge ID, and she applies it based on resin. As we can get a bit of gloom resin going with our selected IDs so far, we can even fuel its conditionals that way instead of strictly during Envy Resonance turns. Aside from that though, she's going to be our first optional ID to bench depending on what permutation of this build we decide to use. Yes, there are multiple. I'll be going over that later. The support skill is quite straightforward. At a 4 res of Envy, we buff damage done by charge IDs. We're going to have a few more of those, just you wait. Last to cover about these fellas is of course their fell bullet vulnerability. While both of them are pierce fatal, Heathcliff is unlikely to die, and both of them can only lower their pride to neutral, making them the less ideal candidates for fell bullets, but still possible targets if required, unless we specifically swap Otis over to Ebony Stem instead of Dimension Shredder. Mind you, Dimension Shredder provides us with a host of benefits for charge IDs, and also gets more potent in an NV resonance. We'll be keeping that there in case we need to make use of it, or perhaps to secure an A-res or whatnot. Past there, we can introduce the second package. Magical Girls. Both Queen of Hatred Dawn and Knight of Despair Rodya are insanely viable in this team composition, with Dawn being especially valuable as both an on-field unit and off-field support, should specific permutations be selected. Starting with Queen of Hatred Dawn, the main appeal here is the sheer deluge of envy we have access to. This is her S2, her S3, and her defensive skill. The S1 provides some utility with her assist attack. While it is otherwise a rather selfish S1, it does provide Wrath resources, that of which we are a little short in supply. Any extra Wrath we can ease out will allow us more opportunities to make use of the potent egos in our lineup. Regardless, the damage output is insane on the field, and she would act as one of our primary sources of damage provided we can ramp her up here. She has access to massive nukes on her S3, which happens to be NV, as well as having many high scaling conditioning. What she deals out in damage, she also has in consistency, as her defensive skill is also an NV skill. She is practically soaked in NV and essentially perfect for this role. An argument can also be made to field Middle Dawn instead. However, she is far clunkier to use than Sinclair, while granting us nowhere near close to as many benefits. While she can fuel Captain's orders with her S3, it doesn't come around enough to be a major consideration. Plus, I would prefer to make use of Queen of Hatred Dawn over Middle Dawn where possible. That being said, Dawn here can also ride the bench. Her support passive is Insanity. She is a charge and SP battery, and all she asks for is a resonance of free envy. Just how broken is her ego to boots? Well, Electric Screaming is an AoE that nukes her charge down to amp up the damage. The passive soups up her attack power if she manages to kill anything with envy. Telepole adds to her battery potential and jacks up her charge out of the gate. She can further fuel it with more envy resin upon use and hitting heads. The passive is also no slouch, randomly jacking up someone's charge counts. And finally, in the name of Love and Hate, gives an absurd number of benefits to anyone with charge. Nukes the field and heals up to 5 allies based on the charge she had accumulated. Past there, she gets another S3, more damage/charge cycling for a passive. When allowed to roam wild, she's fucking nuts. Alright. All of that aside, she gets to ignore SP for the most part, swapping between plus coins and negative coins as appropriate. Just make sure to use her ego when she's in plus mode for the most benefits. Regardless, there's then Rodya. Knight of Despair Rodya. Convincing arguments to field her lie in her self-sufficient kits, whether in Blessing or Despair states. She benefits Captain Ishmael by providing another source of pride to abuse Captain's orders with. Albeit it is on her S3. Her S2 covers the envy requirements for being on the field. However, as with Yi-Sung, it is a tad troublesome due to having only 2 envy in her skill bucket. On the other hand, so long as we leave her in Blessing state, we can make use of Hexnail to substitute in for turns lacking envy resources. Hexnail also grants a passive that deals out more curse to enemies when either Rodya or her allies are hit, plus giving both Sinclair and Heathcliff benefits to tanking damage when required. However, if we wish to make use of Rodya's Despair state instead, we may find ourselves at odds with her consistency, leading to a slow crumbling of envy resonance as we string her along. Out of the 2 magical girls in the package, I do prefer Dawn for the team build. If both are fielded at the same time, they will fight tooth and nail for our sanity heals from Captain Ishmael, causing Captain's orders to almost always land on both the magical girls. Our permutations on this build actually rely on which magical girl we decide to field, which means we would want relevant support should Dawn be fielded, as both magical girls are unlikely to be fielded at the same time. This leads me to Dishi Rodya. The support passive only activates if damage is taken by the ID with the most HP. However, in return for the damage taken, she grants blunt damage up to the ID. If Heathcliff is to take a beating while immobilized, he could get up to 3 blunt damage up, and as the turn after being immobilized he is guaranteed as S3, we can go ahead and dump that power up on a souped up S3 for massive damage. In this regard, a fielded QOH would warrant a benched Dishi, and a fielded KOD would warrant a benched QOH Dawn. As for their viability as fell bullet targets, both magical girls suck at being targets, and Rodya only gets pride neutral at best, and a pierce fatal with Dishi if she comes onto the field somehow. Next, another bloody package. Oh god. This build is very goddamn flexible, so long as you know where to look. This package involves two IDs, one as supports, and one that can double as both on-field and supports. These would be the Arcorp bros, specifically Rhino Mersault and Reindeer Hongers. Rhino Mersault's passive is actually quite important for Captain Ishmael's capabilities as a buffer, since she provides buffs based on dashboard position as well. This passive gives any of our charge IDs the ability to be significantly faster than her, and thus all but guarantee that there isn't any buffs going to waste. If he ever hits the field though, he's immediately taking a fell bullet through the back of his dome. Since I haven't leveled him and he is 2 times Pierce Fatal and 2 times Pride Fatal if I ever have him hit the regret button. Then leaves Hongers. Off-field, he generically provides more damage to charge IDs, for Envy resources to boot. Happy days. But on-field, he can be a bit of a monster as we require it. First off, he's real consistent for Envy, sporting an Envy defense skill as well as an Envy S2. It's a bit odd for Hongers, and what has he to be envious about? Anyhow, meta commentary aside, he has access to Wrath on his S3, as well as benefits from all the other effects we have so far that play nice with charge. His S2 is our bread and butter, though it does come with some annoying conditionals, mainly the need for charge as to not indiscriminately murder some of our teammates. For some of our IDs, it is okay for him to shoot them, specifically Heathcliff, as when he takes damage it will actually grant him Rodya's support passive, which is a bit of a bonus and funny tech. It is, however, unlikely to actually happen. Instead, we do need to pray that he doesn't shoot Sinclair when we also slot a counter in for him. Otherwise, we are in for a world of hurts. Anyhow, the main benefit here is going to be his ability to raise the stagger threshold for us. It will make it easier for Ishmael to hit a stagger with her S3 and thus grant a host of buffs, and also benefits to the team. Aside from that, he is Pierce Fatal and can become Pride Fatal should we ever hit that Roseate Desire button. While he may eventually be a troublemaker for us, at least he'll be a consistent troublemaker. Couple that with team damage and we open up a new fell bullet angle regardless. If we take him on the field, we can consider not fielding Otis instead, as he will provide better Envy res support for our needs. Anyhow, we've 2 sinners left to speak about. First, we'll go with the one that can debatably be fielded, Red Eyes and Penitence Ryoshu. She's charged, does bleed, and has an Envy S1. Why wouldn't we use her? Well, the S1 is far from a guarantee that she'll be in our resonance chains, only holding up half her kit, and it's the weaker half of her kit to boot. She does provide us some lust instead, but is it enough for us to consider? Not exactly. Ryoshu's egos are all rather nice, on-demand fragility, bind, poise, and even a metric shit ton of ego resources, but alas, it performs far better on a lust resonance team. If she comes onto field, however, it isn't a total loss. I just wish she could contribute more consistently than the others. If we ever comes a pure charge, she may be one of the first to get slotted in. Heck, if we weren't adamant on using a quad member, we'd possibly take Yisang's slots. But alas, bench riding or flying in from the chain, she will have to be. Instead, we're going to abuse her support passive. Free Envy res. We get a dip of sanity and healing. Not too notable, just kinda nice. Now we could argue a little for Encore Ryoshu. Throw in someone to assist with bleed support. Get Envy and Wrath too. But again, better prosperity and a lust to resin team. Nothing against you, Ryoshu, there are just more appetizing options here for our game plan. That being said, she can make for a fantastic fell bullet target, with running her Lobcorp version and using any of the Spider Butt Egos, since she'll be at Fatal, Pierce, and Pride resistances both. You can take it easy once again. We'll give you a nice build one of these days, but today is not that day. Last is Gregor. He's played a single role on all of my videos thus far. That has been screaming into the microphone as he burns everything to ashes. Today, he gets to ride the bench. Linton Gregor gives us a passive that can benefit a few of our IDs, at least the ones with Gloom. His support is more of a priority if we are running Knights of Despair Rodya, otherwise he may be better suited as Twin Hook. As Twin Hook, he's specifically beneficial to Pequod Yisang, as should Relentless Stabbing finish someone off, he's getting more poise to utilize with the next one. Likewise, if Ishmael happens to have more poise than Yisang, she can profit as well. All that being said, he may be riding the bench, but that doesn't make him immune to the bullet assessment. Linton makes for a fantastic target so long as we use either Lantern or Christmas Nightmare. The Twin Hook Pirate though, not as good with his Pierce neutrality. With all of the sinners out of the way, let's talk about permutations. If we want all of Ishmael's kit to function, we must take Yi-Sung, and at least one other identity with Pride Affinity in their skills. Otherwise, Captain's Orders cannot be used in focused encounters. However, if it is unfocused encounters, we only need Yi-Sung to act as a Pequod bot and Pride Monkey. This gives us a few different permutations to run, with my favorite probably being the following: Captain Ishmael, Pequod Yi-Sung, Multi-Crack Faust, W-Corp Heathcliff, Middle Sinclair, Knights of Despair Rodya, and R-Corp Honglu. While all of this just looks like a weird charge team, it does manage to capitalize on pretty much all of Captain Ishmael's capabilities. When it comes to that laundry list from earlier, faction-specific effects are covered by Yi-Sung. He gets the benefit from all of the Pequod's effects. Resonance effects are utilized by everyone with Envy. In this case, it's the entire squad. Heathcliff benefits most from the aggro and protection provided in her S1. On kill effects, everyone can benefit from the SP gain. The poise gain less so, but a chance to crit in charge isn't so bad to increase damage further. On stagger effects, R-Corp Hongers helps her achieve these by upping enemy stagger thresholds, making it easier to achieve her S3 conditional. If he staggers a target instead, he could finish it off anyway. Resonance on kill effects, as with the above. The Envy resonance is strong enough, allowing us to provision a 6A res even without Ishmael to participate in it. Aggro. Heathcliff benefits greatly, as the Sinclair were required. Bleed. Sinclair and Yi-Sung both provide sources of bleed. Yi-Sung's S3 can provide quite a lot of counts so long as it manages to crit. Poise. Yi-Sung once again benefits, as does everyone else from a chance to crit. Burn. While there isn't really anything strictly benefiting from Burn, it is still doing damage even without directly interacting with it. If I must though, then Artistar Blossom's passive interacts here, making it self-sufficient burn. Coin power conditionals. Between Yi-Sung's S3, her own bleed application, and Sinclair's bleed application, reaching 10 bleed is possible, just not particularly guaranteed. Preferred enemy. You can fight some lake entities, the composition matters not. Protection. Heathcliff tanks better, even when immobilized thanks to the added protection. Defense level up. Everyone's defensive skills become more usable, notably Heathcliff and Sinclair though. Offense level up. We've fixed the adjacency issues by using Rhino Assault. While it's not perfect, as it'll still roll, if Heathcliff body sacks, then it's all but a guarantee. Unit adjacency bonuses. Likewise with the previous, we've now got a way of fixing someone else's position, as to not make Ishmael the fastest. Assist attack. A lot of S1s benefit from being used in this team, either for resource generation, charge generation, or some kind of special effects like sanity gain or bind. Pride power up. We have 2 SDs that can make use of having more pride damage. It could potentially act as fell bullet fuel, which would be funny to witness. Damage up. No one could hate having some damage up to take home. Preferably, none of it is going to waste too. Execution damage. This one prophesizes itself. Not that we can't help it along with the hard hitters we've brought along with us. Sanity manipulation. If we keep using egos, we're going to want sanity back. Regardless, everyone benefits well from snowballing sanity. We can also keep Dawn in her positive state a little better. Pierce power up. Just Yi-Sung. More power for the fell bullet. And a personal buff. Overheated gas harpoon plays with Artistar. We'll leave it at that. And that, my friends, is full beneficial coverage of her entire fucking kit. Now to talk about potential allowances with the composition. First off, in an unfocused encounter, we can give either her or Yi-Sung the number 1 slot, and they'll be able to make use of Captain's Orders from turn 2 onwards. Since we're unlikely to kill anything on turn 1 anyway, this is perfectly fine in all honesty. It does mean we can drop the need for a third Pride ID on the team, the guaranteed possible usage of Captain's Orders. With that in mind, for unfocused encounters, I drop Kodya and Linton, bringing back both Dishi Rodya and Pirate Gregor, instead opting to field Queen of Hatred Dawn. Now, we have an ungodly amount of damage in the team, and Chaff Clear, with the slightly less consistent ability to give ourselves free resin of Pride for Captain's Orders. This one is now my favorite composition to make use of while utilizing Captain Ishmael. An exceedingly reliable bunch for Envy Resonance, and plenty of disgusting damage to boot. Now, despite how complicated all of that was, the play pattern here is rather too straightforward. We're playing Bejeweled, but with gems stacked entirely in our favor. We are, however, going to have on-turns and off-turns. An on-turn is where we can push the advantage and slam a full row of Envy Resonance. We'll be hitting hard, activating many resonance effects, and doing some hand fixing where possible. This means that we're searching for any way to paint the dashboard purple. If there's a way of proccing Middle Sinclair's 4+ or 6+ A resin counter, we'll go ahead with that. Otherwise, we're shoving in as much purple through defensive skills where possible. The 2 to watch out for in this composition are just Yi-Sung and Ishmael themselves. as they'll be the ones that can inform whether or not we'll achieve a full resonance chain. As for off turns, we use these to generate ego resources when we can't properly paint the board purple. Here, we can also slot in any off-color egos we have the potential use for, whether those be things like Binds or Fluid Sac, or even Artist Star, Blind Obsession, or most jank of all, Fell Bullet. We can make use of the off-colors to proc Captain's orders should we see an angle for Ishmael to kill something and spread the order bonuses around. Now, as for turns that are a hybrid in between, we want to be able to fulfill Captain Ishmael's needs. If we have an angle to kill or stagger with our S3, while also having high absolute resonance count on the board, we could net up to 4 other allies a sanity and poise buff with ease. Past that, we can also make use of semi-resonance to guarantee our assist attack. We don't always need a resin to paint the board purple. We make use of smaller groups of resonance to either trickle the effects down, or proc smaller, less potent versions of the effects like Sinclair's counter. Anyhow, once enough resources have been generated, there are a few egos we want to prioritize in order to cement our sanity lead. First is either Fluid Sac or Blind Obsession. Fluid Sac is better if we're on the back foot, due to the heal and protection passive. However, if we are looking to win more, we can slot in Blind Obsession for a whole wealth of bonuses that favor the team. First off, we can grant additional SP to the team, 25 to 4 allies with the least SP. Next is damage up for 4 allies with the highest SP, more pierce power as required, and 2 poise count to a random ally. All of these stack up to small wins, but as a package, are a very potent win more affair. The passive grants sinking to one of our allies, but afterwards gives them a significant boost in offense level and a point of haste. This will help someone outspeed Ishmael, then further play back into her adjacency bonuses. Last on the really pivotal egos is Binds. The moment we hit the Binds button, most encounters are pretty much over due to boosting resonance bonuses so much. Nothing will be able to clash against any of our full send turns. From there, we can literally dump in any nice to have charge egos in the name of love and hates for the nuke and future nukes, Hexnail for the envy, fragility, and curse. Heck, we can even overclock that one specifically, as the benefits even further from envy fragility rather than the pierce. Past spamming egos for their passes and buffs, we can put our hand on the trigger when we see any of our appealing targets fall lower and lower in HP. We can then wait for the exact moment we feel they are in killing range and smoke one of our own in the back with Fell Bullets. If we can get a 6 resin going, that's 7 torn memory, and when Fell Bullet is up to 4, we can even do it on a free Pride resonance. As with Ahab, we can make Ishmael simply order the death of her own sinners for the sake of more damage. Phew, that was a long video. Could have been even longer if I explored the other 2 team options. Heck, I even explored the Lust version to let real shoe shine. Regardless, that covers Pequod Captain Ishmael for now. If I ever do a follow-up on this one, we can consider this a part 1. Otherwise, I pray that I don't have to touch her this much again if I can help it. While playing Bejeweled is fun, it's also very addicting, and the mere mention of that game makes my fingers twitch and the monkey part of my brain turn on. I've lost countless hours to that fucking game, PopCap. My fucking blind obsession is I'll just say one more bloody round and it'll already be 4 fucking AM. Get me away from that shit, man. Not even the fancy modes or anything. Just the basic game, or the mining one, or the time trials one. Thank God I never got into Candy Crush though. I think that would have actually destroyed me. Alrighty. Limbus Company is a game I've spent way too many hours on. Considering I started during the original run of Murder on the Warp Express and have already amassed 600 hours on a gacha game that really shouldn't need anywhere near that much attention, I think it's safe to say I was an addict at some point. What in the living hell was I addicted to in this game? A well-presented story, with glorious world building and well-paced characterization? Well, not exactly. Most people play that once, maybe a second time during a BOGA, and anyone who has read the source material of any of the characters will probably scream at you for calling it a good adaptation. That's me. I'm that guy when it comes to Kanto 6 and Wuthering Heights. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about reading comprehension in the traditional sense, but instead to cover how it factors into team building, mostly in the sense of cognitive load. First off, we'll be bringing back the Yucca and demonstrating an odd little theorem. I'll tell you a few things you need to track. You let me know down in the comments below how many you were able to keep up with. To this end, I'm going to use Blackjack as an example. The rules are simple. I deal you 2 cards and 1 card to myself. You win if you have more points than me and don't go over 21, resulting in a bust. You can take a card on your turn by hitting the table, or swipe to stand your cards. Once all players have had their turn, I draw cards up to 16 and stand on 17. If you have a higher points total, you win. If I bust, you win. If you get blackjack, an ace, and 10, jack, queen, or king, and I cannot, you win. All of that is the basic rules of the game. Consider that one thing to actively track. Next thing to track is the points value of your hand. Add the value of the 2 cards you're looking at for that total. That makes 2 things to track. Third thing to track is the dealer's card point value. Comparing the aforementioned 2 can inform whether or not to hit or stand. That judgment itself could be a 4th thing to track even. Whose turn is it at a given moment? If you're the only player, just keep that in mind as a 5th thing. And how much did you bet this turn? How many chips did you actually have left? Actually, how much did you even buy in for? Okay, that's 3 more things to keep track of, huh? 8 total, just to play blackjack at a casino table. Not the worst I've seen. How many did you actually get though? Well, in Limbus, you'd press the funny win rate button and go next, right? Single thing to track. Don't have to give a damn, just P and enter. Unfortunately, more than Encephalon is at risk at a blackjack table. You'd want to look at ways of reducing the casino edge. Okay, what if we start card counting? There's only 1 deck of cards, we should be able to keep a count of 1 up and 1 down, right? Heck, if it doesn't reshuffle, we might have a perfect count to work with. Okay, well, that's another load, isn't it? What if I introduced other players at the table, and their actions, their bets, their hand signals, heck, even their faces? Even more load. Okay? What if the cards are permanently being reshuffled and every round is functionally new? Well, no more counting I suppose, but you'd have other issues now. What's the point of all this? What in the fuck does blackjack have to do with my team building philosophy? The theory of 7 plus minus 2. Short-term cognitive load. Knowing this is the difference between whether or not you're allowed to just press that win rate button and call it a day. The difference between me sending a mate P-enter from my mouse macros or actually paying attention to my bloody sinners, crying out in pain, and about to get a fell bullet to the face because I didn't account for the ideal amount of porn memory. The theory is proposed by George Miller out there. Don't think it's the Mad Max creator, but anyway. The theory proposed states that the average human being can only keep around 7 things in short-term memory. These are things we would need to keep track of actively while performing whatever tasks are in front of us. In the case of blackjack, the number of things to actively keep track of is potentially so overwhelming that the casino keeps this in mind to exploit the customers and make them play more freely than they realistically have reason to, spending more money and fuss time on the premises. Due to their lack of understanding the real functions of the game, alongside the addictive nature of gambling, players are slowly milked for cash in their wallets. I would rather you not be that, so at the very least, let me tell you how to reduce cognitive load and make more informed decisions when putting together a team in Limbus, saving you shards, pools, leveling tickets, and threads among other things. At the end of the video, we'll bring back the mat and I'll give you a brief on how you can reduce blackjack's cognitive load too. Maybe as a party trick of sorts. Don't actually go into a casino to test it out, trust me, the house always wins, and I've done both the math and the hours to advise you on that. Far more hours than I've spent on Limbus anyway. Around quadruple, I reckon. Limbus has a lot to keep track of during combat encounters. Project Moon has done its best to condense everything into as readable a UI as possible. Let's start simple. At the base, you gotta keep track of HP and sanity, dagger thresholds, speed, status effects, skill buckets, enemy skills, coins and their power, offense/defense level, flashing, skill sin affinities, skill targeting, skill conditionals, sinner passives and supports, sinner backup order, turn count, waves/enemies, ego resources, resistances, both sin and damage type, and that's all without ego gifts. Or other sorts of buffs, or even the Durante button up there. Okay, let's take a deep breath and consider just how many of these actually matter while playing Limbus. Oh, what's that? All of them. Yes, all of them bloody matter. But thankfully, the computer does most of the work, and you can hit P, enter, right? Well, about that. Even the computer isn't that good at calculating everything. And things change the moment clashes go right or wrong, special effects and passives trigger, bosses phasing, things not going entirely as planned, prompting improvisation, and a whole host of other considerations. So what can we do to reduce the cognitive load? There's a few approaches available. The most popular is to let the computer do its thing. You're a Project Moon fan. You don't read. You've probably got this video on a second monitor. Why should you start reading now, when a random 27-year-old on the internet tells you to do so? Okay, sure. Cuts your cognitive load down to just one. Pressing that win rate button and the enter button. Letting sparks fly, clashes go awry, and death and despair to ensue. This is like betting it all on red and leaving your fate in the hands of an entirely rigged game of roulette. Not the best. Alright, what if we actually want to play the game well? We can pick through each of those aforementioned pieces bit by bit and tackle it piecemeal. Check HP and sanity, see if you're almost staggered, take a look at relevant statuses, check what skills you have and the upcoming ones, target enemy skills after evaluating whether or not clashes are favourable, or if passives come into play as you'd expect them to. Bank on fighting to resistances and making informed plays, the route expected of a player that understands the game. But, that takes so much bloody time and we're not in the library anymore. Not everything needs to be considered, right? You're not trying to do a perfect run. Just clear or even do your dailies. It isn't that deep. You still want to hit that win rate button, don't you? Even if the above method lets you tackle things in such a way that your grandmother would probably clear all the way to the latest content. You think you're better than that. Heck, you think your team should be capable of so much more with so much less. You know what? Let's tackle it from that angle. What does it take to reduce the cognitive load during combat to its absolute minimum? Building your team around the win rate button and automatic play. Well, first off, you've got to go from being a player to a planner. Kind of think. Think of all the ways we can reduce that laundry list and leave space for eating crayons while we do it. First, we're not necessarily picking a status, but if we had to, we would be picking one of the more self-sufficient or self-sustaining ones. Like charge. God, I hate charge. Or poise, which is just thinly veiled charge gambling. Those two could not care less about count on enemies, and with newer IDs, have more than enough ways to sustain themselves. Compared to the others, Tremor needs a lot of setup for high returns, Bleed is both count and Bloodface reliant, Sinking requires you to pay attention to counts, likewise with Rupture. Burn is an exception here, but since it is applied to enemies, we can't guarantee it all of the time compared to Poison Charge, which don't necessarily reset upon killing something. I'm not really an enjoyer of either of these statuses. I'm kind of a Tremor guy and have been since picking up this game by some miracle. That being said, we no longer have to keep track of count quite as aggressively, nor the states of our enemies. Most things build up the two statuses just for using them, leaving us to cut the idea of status out of our minds for the most part, depending on what kind of IDs we then choose to pick. For the sake of this example, let's say we want to go with Poise. How well does Poise do with its skills out the gates? We need to care about SP gain problems, clashing issues, coin power, damage types. What about passives, conditionals, ego resources? Well, first off, if we're taking the Poise route, we've got to mostly rely on pride for damage and resources. At most, we've got to power 1 or 2 egos to make things smoother, otherwise the rest of the IDs available in the status are quite simple to use and don't require all too much micromanagement. That being said, not quite filled a full roster without having to work around some gimmicks, so let's instead forget about said gimmicks, period, and work in some charge IDs. I hate to say it, but a good chunk of the IDs I'd think of for brain-off gameplay all revolve around well PP. They're kinda just the best for this sort of thing due to their power level as well as their, for the most part, set and forget nature. This means a team of the previous well PP identities will likely let you turn your brain off due to how hard they need to sell the damn events. Consider it the power of money, fueled by aura and hype moments. Bloody hate it, but what can you do? To this end, my brain off lineup may look something like this. On the field, the Full Stop Boys, Chief Faust, both the Magical Girls, Red Eyes and Penitence Roshu, Sinclair, and in reserve, BL Sang, Rhino Man, Captain Ish, BO Otis, and Pirate Greg. Outside of the World PP IDs, a good chunk of these are readily available for sharding, or likely to come home as you go about rolling at random. As far as I'm concerned though, this team reduces the cognitive load dramatically, down to pressing the win rate button. All of their mechanics are basically automatic and quite reliable. At most, you'd be looking to use a counter on Rodya, but otherwise, everything else plays itself. The ideal move at almost all times is going to be hit the win rate button, and profit. However, I have a nickname for this kind of gameplay. For the win raters in general. I like calling them woodpeckers. They press maybe 1 or 2 buttons at a time and let the pretty lights and effects do their job. You can zone out, space out, and You can zone out, you can space out, and your grandma can do it too. What am I alluding to, huh? Well, you're no better than someone who plays with a slot machine if you decide to engage in this kind of team building. You aren't playing for the sake of the game anymore. You are likely just addicted to seeing big number go up or any semblance of numbers at all. There is no satisfaction in reaching the conclusion I have with this team, because realistically speaking, most other teams can hit it with a little more tweaking and better cohesion. This team is boring. Extremely boring. When your cognitive load hits an all-time low while playing a game, you should instead ask yourself why you're playing at all. If you're grinding for the sake of grinding, I implore you to look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're having fun. Are you intrinsically motivated to play this game, or are you extrinsically motivated? Are you playing just for the rewards and external acclaim, or are you here because you actually want to make a well-oiled machine of a team? Phew, that got a little dark. That tends to happen in my old line of work. You see the best and worst in people daily. The highest of the highs, lowest of the lows. That being said, for the intrinsically motivated individuals left watching, let me talk about how I prefer to build teams. When it comes to cognitive load, I am for the most part going to disregard it now. For if you've made it this far in the video without falling asleep or feeling particularly offended, then you are the sorts that would love what I've got brewing. In that case, like the video and subscribe. I'm in between jobs at the moment and could use a little leg up if you don't mind. Those who are here for the love of the game rather than optimization, let's talk about deck building, since for all intents and purposes, we're building a 12 to 60 card deck. First off, when picking a team, there are archetypes. In Limbus's case, there is status teams, faction teams, damage type teams, and Exodia style teams for the most part. There are of course meme and gimmicky teams, but those can usually be attributed to the aforementioned consequently. To start then, we are going to want a basis. Are we building a status team? Bleed, sinking, tremor, poise, charge, rupture, etc. Are we perhaps going for a bunch of fixers, sevens, sinks, lose? Or heck, we're picking a single favorite ID and playing all our eggs in one basket to max out their potential. In this particular case, let's go the road less beaten. Let me show you what I currently enjoy running in Tremor. Our basis is twofold. We're here to soup up Regret Fost as much as possible, while getting the benefits of the status as a sideline. Plus, we want to look into her gimmick more extensively. Regret Fost's main appeal is the ability to gain attack weights on her S2 and S3 based on her current Tremor count. This gives us a soft conditional we need to meet in order to make proper use of her kit. By default, her S1 gives her 6 count, regardless of whether she won the clash or lost it. She does need to use it, however. Unfortunately, this S1 is pretty terrible otherwise. It does, however, guarantee that we meet her attack weight conditionals on the following turn without any extra requirements. The same can be said of her defensive skill, where so long as it gets used, she gains 6 Tremor count. Tremor count, of course, reduces by 1 at the end of turn. Very important detail to keep in mind, especially in regards to her S2. Her S2 does not allow her by normal means to loop the added attack weight. This is due to giving her only 4 Tremor count on use, and an additional count if she hits heads on her first coin, totaling 5 and losing 1. But then only have 4 Tremor counts on the turn after, using her S2. Her S3 is even greedier by all accounts, only gaining Tremor counts when she manages to score a kill with it. At that, it is only 2 Tremor counts. However, this S3 can gain up to 2 more attack weights by consuming 10 Tremor counts. Plus, we want to increase her Tremor counts as fast as possible, but through vanilla means and without the support of the rest of her team or ego passives, this is less than ideal. So with the star of our team being Regret Fost, let us see what tools we can apply. Here we can consider a few things. In deck building terms, our options here are staples, support, packages, and techs. These come with the territory of the archetypes, but also may have some unique considerations depending on what we're going for. Since our aim is quite unusual considering the age of this ID and its needs, we should prioritize those first. We want anything that can increase our Tremor count faster. Adding more Tremor counts or finding more sources of it is our ideal. Thankfully, they exist and are rather simple to implement in this archetype. Support passives are the first place to look. My first and most immediate consideration is Zero Diviryoshu. The AI applies an additional Tremor count to self upon using skills or coin effects that would grant it, up to twice per turn to the ID in the number 1 deployment slot. Since Fost is our star player, she will keep that slot to herself. Condition for fueling this passive is 4 sloth, of which in a Tremor team should be exceedingly easy to attain. Next is Molorotus. This one is a bit contentious, as in the same slot we also have T-Corp Otis, and both Molar and her are rather good IDs to field in Tremor, both having rather strong arguments to be used as staples. However, I'm not an Otis fan to begin with, sorry, and our star is still fast. Smaller Otis will ride the bench as support and provide more tremor count to an ally with the most tremor count for only 3 sloth, and we'll be keeping it that way. From there, let me introduce the 3 other supporting IDs this time round. Spice Bush Yi-Sung gives us 10% more AoE damage, as long as we manage to fit it in a free res sloth chain. It shouldn't be too difficult considering the lineup I have planned. Rodya has 2 options here depending on whether we're expecting to win or lose more. T-Corp Rodya helps us win clashes against targets with Tremor, but also requires us to have free sloth res like Spice sang. While this benefits the team in general, we're here for Forced. So we're going a Rose Spanner. For 4 Pride, we can increase the amount of stagger threshold raised by 20% should the ID triggering a Tremor Burst be the slowest. So how do we guarantee that, eh? Well, we have a couple of ways of manipulating speed, but most notably, this plays into Regret Force's passive. The second half of it rather, Mental Corruption. While we almost never want to trigger this, it does give us a blunt power up and bind, coupled with a lower speed range, should place her comfortably in the last slot. Utilizing the stagger threshold raise with Rodya's passive on her S3, we can potentially output quite a bit of fixed damage if some stars align. And with Faust here being our star, that could happen if we rig the deck a little with egos later. Finally, and probably most jank, is going to be Eurodivi Honglu. You see, we can't afford to let him fuck with our count build up, so we're benching him. The free sloth res extra tremor burst chance is an okay enough passive, but realistically, it won't go off that often. However, we could just slot some other generic more useful ID in there, like his base ID or Ting Tang. For insurance though, I'll be leaving him as Eurodivi, in case he does need to come in and pull some weight. All that covers the support section, so let's cover the remaining staples. We're going to want to field T-Corp Don for Time Moratorium. While at times it may not be the best thing to come out of her due to delaying encounters or staggers or quite a few other useful things, having the potential to line up a damage amp turn would be nice to have, as it also counts as having another negative effect. We do get some benefit out of it from the Regret Force passive, that of which favors having more debuffs on the enemy to reduce their clash power against Faust. Amplitude Conversion Chain also can be pretty handy, provided we need to clash harder for whatever reason. That being said, as an ID, T-Corp Don is growing less favorable, but can still clash pretty reliably under the effects of Borrowed Time. An odd pick here is going to be Ufi Heathcliff. Okay, I know not a lot of people like making use of him, however I do, and Asymmetrical Inertia is a fun ego to get going. It also provides access to some more debuffs and ego resource generation variety, most notably Envy and Gloom. We can also make use of binds if it's really required as well. Nonetheless, having him here is nice for our counts once Clockwinding gets going. Next up, we've got Ishmael. Now there's something here that makes her particularly essential to our usage case, that being Christmas Nightmare's ego passive. This ego passive allows us to fuel forced attack weights even more should we manage to trigger it, giving us 2 more counts per turn, up to 4 should the stars align a very specific way. Now the contention here is which ID to run between Hanafuda and Zwei. On one end, Zwei Ishmael is an insane ID with no strings attached to it. Requires a bit of setup and has a reliable way to nuke out damage as well as profit from Rodya's support passive. It pains me to say that Zwei Ishmael can sabotage our operations here, due to also being tremor counts hungry. He can immediately jack herself up to 10 counts and then just suck away the gain from Otis's passive, cutting one of our forced engines away. If the encounter is particularly hard, or if we can eventually eclipse her gains, then perhaps we can make use of her. But if we just want to rely on force, we should instead throw in Hanafuda Ishmael, the boogeyman that has haunted me at night, because goddamn that video has left containment, and opened a Pandora's box I can no longer close. Please send help. At least put me in contact with others like me. That would be appreciated. Anyhow, I'd reckon that covers staples and supports for this build. Let's talk about the package I'm proposing, as an alternative condition for winning, and to give us a damaging source of tremor bursts. I'd like to add in the fun package, both Massault and Sinclair. Having both makes the application of Tremor Scorch far more consistent, allowing for some semblance of damage to be dealt through the status aside from its usual effects. The 2 of them also give us a long-term game plan, having Massault become something of a monster as he chews through bullets, and eventually through a few ego resources to soup him up beyond measure. All the egos I plan to use here are quite insane with Fumsalt, and thus his inclusion as a fielded ID is a no-brainer. On top of that, it provides access to more useful ego resources, and of course Burn, another negative status effect to add. We've got more fuel for Force passive to boot, basically. With Claire also refilling his bullets, The two should make a rather strong powerhouse as fights go on and on. Last but not least, allow me to introduce our tech option of choice, Fire Fist Gregor. First off, he's not a Tremor ID, he isn't going to eat into our counts. However, he provides a nice stim of burn counts, which allows us to propel the reach of Scorch beyond Eternal 2. He also happens to provide us with some sweet gloom for his defensive skill as required. Alternatively, we can make use of Alan Gregor, which is a far more greedy choice. It provides us access to 2 more status effects in the form of Bleed and Open/Deep Wound. Maybe a little on the overkill side, as we already have access to Tremor, Burn, Sinking, Defense Down, Time Moratorium, Bind, Offense Level Down, and plus Coin Drop. The sheer deluge of which being a little much. It does, however, mean that a lot of Ego Gifts in MD will see some form of use or another. For the sake of this build though, I'll be going with Fire Fist for that consistency outside of MD. Anyhow, this may not be the burstiest build. It isn't even the most meta build for Tremor by any stretch of the imagination. However, it does find room as a way of clearing chaff for Tremor and exploiting the ever-living hell out of forced attack waves. Almost every part of the team plugs itself either into force or something that will eventually plug back into force. With that glimpse into my team building philosophy, I suppose you can call me a nerd for even trying that hard to put all of this together. But I rather enjoy watching Force slam things with a hammer. There's a certain irony to it. That and this team makes use of a lot of my favorite ideas in the game now, which all happen to be able to fuel this team idea. To summarize, come up with an idea or pick an archetype. Pick your favorite sinner or ID or whatever floats your boats. Figure out the staples, decide on a few packages that could be airdropped in for your ideal composition, and polish it all out with supports and techs. Following all that, I'd imagine most of you could find ways of creating really fun teams that don't just revolve around slamming all the newest IDs into a team and calling it a day. The supports, read the passives, what they provide, how difficult they are to fulfill by your on-field IDs. Figure not just what it does, but the implications it has on how the rest of the team plays. You shouldn't just be reading. Go apply some comprehension while you're at it. What does it enable? What jank are you allowed to get away with in its implementation? How much can you warp on-field IDs to its condition? As for staples, there are IDs and egos that have far higher power budget than others. There are some that also link directly with others to topple and surmount that power level, so long as they're all together. These combos are staples and should most often be designed around. Think Blood Fiends or the Hay Shows. Heck, you could even consider the Blade lineage in that regard. Past there, consider your packages. Off the top of my head, I enjoy the Fun package, Full Stop package, N-Corp Duo, the Quad Trio, and the Middle. They're all fun to airdrop in as the team allows. Finally, consider techs to either enhance your existing staples and packages, or otherwise hard counter specific encounters. While I don't have a comprehensive list of these, there are a lot of 1ID solutions to some of the hardest fights in the game, or bandage solutions for the idea you are trying to execute upon. These something like Kurokuma Hongers to take on Bamboo Hatted Kim, for example. Anyhow, I did say I'd teach you a bit about blackjack earlier in the video. I lied. Just don't fucking gamble, alright? If you have to, follow the chart, but know that the house always wins, and I was in the kennel doing their dirty work. Alrighty. This is gonna be a long and painful one, especially because I ignored the obvious, and there were multiple routes available to make it good function. That being said, let us talk about Magic Bullet Otis. The ID, at least. Aside from her murderous team-killing tendencies, Magic Bullet is what I would consider hyper-premium burn support. Depending on how status-brained you are, she is functionally essential due to Dark Flame. This is a status effect that reduces defense level by its value, and deals burn potency multiplied by its value and pride damage. Functionally, this is a massive 800% multiplier to burn damage, due to also allowing the original burn to take effect. Do note that this additional damage can be amplified or reduced by pride resistance. The mileage may vary. However, for a single status to magnify damage to this extent on its own is rather insane. This gets pretty close to a deluge, but has some caveats on what can successfully apply it. The S1 guarantees a single stack of Dark Flame the following turn, which while nice to functionally double burn damage, it is far from ideal. S2 can apply up to 3 Dark Flame in one go. However, once she reaches 4 Magic Bullet stacks, she no longer applies Dark Flame with her S2, making it apply nothing instead. Essentially, it gets soft capped in a really strange way. S3 on the other hand applies Dark Flame equal to her Magic Bullet stacks. Upon hitting the soft cap of 4 Magic Bullet stacks, you can go beyond it through either using her S3 to stack up one more bullet, or use her defense skill to gain another bullet. This status interacts with the majority of her kits, yes, even her passive. Did you even know she had a functional passive? Well, I did. Weirdly because of Pridwin when I started out, then forgot it even existed for a year, but regardless, yes, it very much exists and can be exceedingly potent when triggered at the right timing. It grants her poise potency up to burn potency before attack, so long as the target has -4 or more defense level down. Considering Dark Flame can trigger it, should be really easy to get going, right? Nope. Tried just casually win raiding or slapping things with her kits, and slapped headfirst into her S2 soft cap without realizing. This passive is hyper-specific and has been haunting me for the past 3 days. Couple that with the community's spite for anything that inflicts defense level down, and you get a stupid amount that I'm required to test myself or conduct research upon. Regardless, the payoff we're looking for is twofold. 1. Stack Dark Flame and defense level down to at least 4, as well as 20 burn on her main targets. 2. Have S3 ready to use at 4 to 6 magic bullets. Firing that should hit all targets, inflicting them with Dark Flame for the next turn. This means that for the sake of our team building framework, we're attempting to build something of a functional Magic Bullet Otis Exodia team. To that end, our sub-requirement is going to be burn. Make use of that sweet Dark Flame on the way. The third, really odd dependency we're going to have is the ability to inflict defense down, whether through skills, passives, or support passives. Leaves us with some really weird branches we can opt for. We'll give all three a brief overview before selecting one for our basis. 1. Pure Burn. We would be making use of more classic burn team to stim up the burn potency to the maximum, while using Dark Flame as a nice to have. Staple IDs would be Firefist Gregor, Dawn Office Sinclair, and the Lou Association Fixers. Most of the benefit here lies in being able to stack burn potency hand over fist before Dark Flame eventually turns it into a nuke. 2. Tremor Burn. We covered this one in the last video of the Fun package. The unusual basis here revolves around making use of Regret Force on-field passive, and another unit with Tremor Burst to outspeed Magic Bullet Otis to inflict several stacks of defense down. After which, Otis should then be able to fire a magic bullet into the target that has been set up for the poise stim. Couple that with Shallow Breathing from Force for Calgia, and we have a rather pretty potential style combo. 3. Rupture Burn. This one is unlikely to get going until we get Cockleaf in a week or so. Depending on the nature of his kits, we may be able to fuel Otis's defense level down hungry passive in some surprising ways. Anyhow, in Rupture Burn we'd be looking at a rather unusual tech, by benching both Fang Hunt Hongers and Davat Sinclair. For the time being, we would also be fielding Davat Rodya, capitalize on both aforementioned passives, for defense down. Anyway, for my own sanity, we're going with the Tremor Burn team. Our staples would be the Thumb duo and Fost, due to both Sinclair and Massault's capacity to inflict multiple Tremor bursts. This is also coupled with the fact that Massault, given time, can increase his maximum and minimum speed, all but guarantee Tremor bursts before Otis gets to fire at the target. Past that, we're taking our good boy Firefist Gregor to ensure smooth counts increase for the burn. Here, he's practically essential. Past there, we're going to need Sync East Dawn. Why? Well, aside from the burn, her kit innately provides defense level down as she scales her crits and nerve stacks to inflict them. She'll also eventually outspeed Otis, giving us a backup should the Thumb fail to provide needed defense down. This setup is pretty ego resource intensive due to the passives, but with any luck, we should be able to fund them before needing to make use of. Let's address the elephant in the room. Aside from my scruffy as hell voice, I have no bloody clue where this is actually coming from. Anyway, Magic Bullet Otis has both an ID and an ego, and you'd be fooled to forget that. This ego eliminates a vast majority of her problems, including herself, as long as you manage to fuel it. Soft cap on 4 bullets? Nah. Skip it entirely if the resonance is right. Lack of on-demand Dark Flame? Don't even have to wait for the next turn to see it. Did we even mention that this thing has 7 fucking modes, depending on her magic bullet stacks? This bloody thing is insane and completely transforms how we should even approach it. The one guiding limitation, however, is the opportunity cost of the ego resources. 4 Pride, 2 Lust, and 2 Wrath is pretty expensive, and not all too accessible without some major shifts to accommodate for it. Within the 6 on-field slots we've just filled, we have 6 sources of Pride, 7 sources of Wrath, and 3 sources of Lust, the last of which being mildly troublesome to guarantee. So who are my considerations at this point then? Well, if we want a close to perfect fix for ego resources, we'd be looking at Lou Rodya. He has Pride, Wrath, and Lust, as well as a Wrath counter, and does Burn too. What if, and hear me out, what if our greed led us to believe in the possibility of Pierce fragility? Let's airdrop in the full stop boys. Why? 1. They can help us fuel Pride resources quite well, either through their S3s or by abusing their defensive skills. 2. They offer Envy and Gloom Generation 2. This broadens up the kinds of egos we can abuse with them. Notably, I'm staring at 4 Calgear, specifically Force 4 Calgear. 3. We can flexibly start with either just one on field or both on field, both with solid arguments for their deployment accordingly. 4. Pierce fragility, for the sake of firing harder hitting magic bullets. Of course, by implementing the full stop package, we are inevitably delaying our game plan by up to 4 turns. This is due to having to expend Heathcliff's ammo to trade him out for Force. Due to how long it would take to amass 6 RAF or even trigger her passive, leaving her off field while the resources pile up is a solid idea. This, coupled with the need to set up Tremor to even see a Tremor burst come out at all, doubly makes this doable. With our bursters also being the quite Tremor neutral fun, count is also the least of our worries. As long as we get the benefits of bursts at just the right time, we will be profiting. Now arguably, we could also leave Sinclair off the field, dropping him in as Heathcliff leaves to act as an ammunition. When Sinclair comes in, however, he would most likely be forced to spam his defensive skill or take clashes he can win to boost his SP to workable level. Regardless, he could assist with stimming the game plan with his Tremor bursts once the passives have been racked up accordingly. Finally, is the question of fielding each boy individually on the field. Heathcliff is quite strong from the get-go and shoves out Pierce fragility on quite a few of his skills up front. This could stim up Don and Sinclair's damage early while also powering up any magic bullets we decide to fire early on. However, in fresh fights, we wouldn't have the ego resources or setup required to make Otis's kit work out quite as well, outside of an early Superbia to get things rolling faster. Hongers will come in at lower than desired sanity, making his fight a little more desperate. Hongers also is usually there to make Heathcliff fire bullets more often, rotating him out faster, making this a less attractive option. On the plus side though, Hongers will come in with his passive active most likely, with boosted up skills to take advantage of Heathcliff's retreat. On the other hand, starting with Hongers on the field, we can build up his sanity right away, and begin making use of his passive as resources naturally accrue with Heathcliff in the back. Should anyone kick the bucket and Heathcliff then come in, Heathcliff also returns with a rather ridiculous set of bonuses to soup him up as needed. In comparison, in fights where resources have already been accrued, like MD, having Hongers start with the combo passive active also results in quite a lot of upfront damage as well. With those considerations in mind, we can tailor our use of the full stop package to suit our needs here surprisingly well. Thus, let us cover our supporting cast, our bench warmers for the team. The no-brainer is Lou Rodya. The passive massively stims all shots fired by Magic Bullet Otis's S3, so long as she's in the first slot. When everyone's SP is the same, she'll be the one to benefit. And when everyone's at full and she's just fired a bullet, she'll benefit too. Plus, being able to directly convert burn into more pierce damage is a nice starting point. While our swap shenanigans with the full stop boys could mess with the recipient of this bonus, Otis's SP is going to be a yo-yo while making use of Magic Bullet regardless, either the S3 tanking her sanity or ego use doing so. Next, we'll be looking at Yi-Sung. We've got a few potential IDs that can fill his slot, though to be honest, I'd rather be fielding him than having him as a backliner. With enough gloom, LCB Sinner Yi-Sung can let us manage Otis' sanity loss a bit more comfortably. Anytime we'd lose SP firing magic bullets, we could get back 10 SP through here. While it's nothing too fancy and is a little steep to initially fuel, sometimes simple is best. Spice Bush once again comes up here, however getting a free res of Sloth when we'd be wanting a lot of other affinities besides Sloth is not ideal. Ring Sang actually has quite a solid support passive, being able to net us back 12 SP should we at least hit twice into a target with 3 debuffs, which is quite easy to do here. Needing 4 Lust resources owned is rather okay. We would just need to keep in mind that we'd be looking to expend Lust to fuel our bullets. But conditionally, he's an upgrade over LCB Yi-Sung, while being a little easier to fuel our composition. Lu Sung would be the most premium option for healing SP, if it wasn't split between 2 targets while requiring a free res RAF chain and only healing 5 to 10 SP. We don't have enough IDs that would lose SP outside of the base conditions to justify it. If we were running with the pure burn team, we would instead benefit from his on-field passive, which provides a far greater SP heal on a more RAF-centric team. If anything, since we're utilizing his support passive, he would rank rather low in priority. An exceedingly funny consideration would be Fell Bullet Yisung. In this particular case, he would literally be Intrusive Thoughts the passive. We'd be flipping a coin whether Otis' sanity is low for a 50-50 shots to shoot her allies, and maybe kill them to boot for a damage up buff, provided she's the slowest on the team. This one, while funny, is a hard pass due strictly to the consistency issues. Best results, I reckon we're picking LCB Sung and Ring Sung. Since I've got Ring Sung kicking around and we're in the era of chain battles, I'll be slotting him in for those sanity heals. Next is Ishmael. In short, almost all of her IDs are terrible riding the bench. As Ishmael is my favorite sinner, it's a bit painful to be making a video about my least favorite sinner while having to slander her at the same time. That being said, if I could have her fit in more appropriately, I would have given Captain Ishmael the slot on the team. Not just for having the ability to trigger assist attacks, which would be exceedingly useful here, but because her resource generation does also line up quite well here. That, added with her capacity for poise and burn as well as bleed, would have worked wonders. Alas, she also has the best passive here for riding the bench, Captain's Orders, which is unfortunately also rather shite, but in the right circumstances we may be able to get some poise counts on Otis. Stack that with passive's massive poise generation, we could have crits for days. Please be patient while I get together a very, very extensive video for her down the line. My damn favorite IDs, especially with all the resonance tools we have these days. Anyhow, last would be Roshu. We have some interesting options here. First up to bat is another member of the gun team, LCCB Roshu. The shotgun is badass, and Lucky Sig used to interact with magic bullets, from what a mate told me. Anyhow, when Solemn Lament Yisung first came out, several changes were made to the skill that made it less than ideal. If we're taking her, we're stimming everyone else with ammo instead of Otis, so it'll have to be a pass for now. In future, if I decide to make a ridiculous gun team, she's going to be one of the first consideration. Next, we have Malshu. Yes, the bloody Heisho. Why? If we somehow manage to generate 5 Gluttony, we can almost guarantee that anyone but Otis will be the fastest, and our options for the fastest are quite nice. So long as the +2 haste lands on any of the 4 who can inflict Tremor Burst, or otherwise inflict defense down, we are golden. In addition, if it lands on either Full Stop Boy, they could also provide the most value via their Pierce Fragility. So while Malshu is a consideration to keep in mind, building up to her usage may be a tad painful to consider. Content where this passive can be fueled, it has the potential to be one of the best we can make use of. As for the most consistent one we can offer, Made Shoe. This one works on multiple levels, mainly because our aim would be to get this functioning on Sync Don. By winning clashes, Don would receive more poise count. That poise count then converts to more consistent poise potency buildup. Furthermore, that poise potency then turns into haste. The additional haste granted will also allow Dawn to clash better with coin power, plus getting her skills through more consistently, pumping her poise, applying burn, and also provisioning that sweet defense down we so really needed. When all that haste builds up, we'll eventually be in for Dawn practically being fixed as first. So long as she hits before Otis, we are all but guaranteeing enough defense down. Plus, having Made Shoe turns Dawn into a consistency machine. Should Dawn manage to receive 3 haste on a given turn, that places her speed range at 7 to 10, whereas Otis should remain at 3 to 7. My math is right, that only leaves us with a statistical 5% chance of having both of them go at the same time. With all that said and done, that's our lineup. There's some unique gimmicks at play here, working overtime behind the scenes to make things work. But otherwise, we've got quite a few unusual synergies to pull everything together. While not quite as well-oiled a machine as the previously proposed Regret Force team, this team makes use of a bunch of real jank stuff that seemingly clicks together to fire a magic bullet that may just slam right back into your team when you're not paying attention. Alright, so how do we get the most mileage out of this setup? Well, there's a few play patterns we can follow. If using Superbia, you can reset until there's enough resonance on the board to max out her magic bullet gain in one go. You'd be looking for a 4 resin with her S3 up next if you're a gambling man. That way, you can loop an ego into an S3, into another ego, provided you generate the right resources. Do note that this has a high likelihood for friendly fire, just out of the reasoning that her sanity is going to drop like a rock. It will also not do all too much damage outside of MD, when the burn count would have already stacked up. Let's play the slightly longer game. We are looking for 6 Wrath, 4 Lust, and 4 Pride to start. This will activate all the support passives we've been looking out for. While it would be preferable to never fall below these numbers, it will be inevitable as we use Otis's magic bullet ego. We want to achieve this over the course of 3 to 4 turns, depending on how long it'll take for Heathcliff to cycle out, during which we'll also be wanting to prioritize Pride, as that is most likely to run out first, as we make use of her ego being the highest cost part. While generating resources, we'll also be looking out for both burn and tremor counts on our target of choice. We'll also be building up magic bullets and adjusting the way we use Otis's ego to map. If we get 2 S2s off with Otis, we'll be sitting at 2 bullets. 3, and we'll be sitting at 3 by the start of turn 3. If we miraculously hit 1 more, we're already at soft cap by the end of turn 3, and can start considering what other ways we can amp things up with. Alternatively, we can use her defensive skill in slots to generate us a bullet as well. This also lets us bypass the soft cap from her ID alone. Regardless, when we have enough ego resources to fire off, we're aiming to hit either 5 or 6 magic bullet stacks. By using the ego, we'll be ramping this up quite fast, due to it giving a magic bullets for every resin up to 4. 5 even if we somehow have 0 bullets and have a 4 chain ready to go. Regardless, do some simple math before firing and we should land at either 5 or 6. If there's an S3 coming up, prioritize trying to land at 5 instead. That way we can fire off the S3 for 6 bullets, and fire the ego off with 6 bullets for massive group damage. Now the trouble is when we want to loop things. At 7 magic bullets, there's a 50-50 shot of her deciding to fire the bullet indiscriminately. It's a quick montage of all the instances I could find in B-roll of her deciding on attempted murder for her teammates. And here's one of my Twitch viewers managing to reset my lobotomy corp day. A violet dawn. If you remember the World PP where Solemn Lament came out, here you go. It's these motherfuckers. Oh, fuck. Unlucky. Nope, fuck. Thanks, Bahamut. Really do aim to please. Regardless, once that 7th bullet has been fired off, we reset to 0 and replay her minigame again. Only when we fire an S3 at 7 stacks do we actually lower the bullets we have. Alternatively, we have the executioner shots. The 7th bullet on her ego fires at a single target for massive damage. It changes the target's pierce resistance to fatal before firing off the mother of all bullet. This bullet, however, comes right back at Otis, killing her instantly. Now, sans any revival shenanigans, that death is rather permanent, and should really be saved for the final blow against a boss, or to scar the rest of your team for life. I've made use of it on Mayos during my first run through, only to figure out she had a second phase and the damage was nowhere near enough to cheese her through Dark Flame alone. Regardless of the game plan above, an important thing to note is Dark Flame's expiry. It will expire at the end of turn after burning away an ungodly amount of damage depending on burn. All of the ways Magic Bullet applies Dark Flame via her ID will trigger Dark Flame on the following turn. All the ego uses, however, trigger it on the same turn instead. Keep this in mind for when you are planning to stack up burn accordingly. Whether you need to stack it up on the current turn to make full use of the ego's Dark Flame, or the subsequent turn to make use of the ID's Dark Flame. Aside from that, her ego passive does 2 things really nicely. It stims up burn potency if under 30, and allows her base attack skills to apply up to 2 Dark Flame on the current turn. All that said, the last play pattern I desperately need you to learn when making use of her is to never S3 after an ego on the same turn. You are all but guaranteeing a coin flip to shoot your team. You can of course shoot an S3 first, then the ego. Just pray you calculated the targeted skills right and she shouldn't suddenly murder her teammate. Maybe just herself though. That all being said, was all this worth the deck building effort I went through to make it all functional? This time I can only say maybe. Worse still, that maybe might only last a few more days once we see Cockcliff's kit. Alrighty. We need to have a talk about the poster child for potential memes. Lobotomy Ego Sunshower Heathcliff. He's been the butt end of every potential man-related joke, meme, or shitpost regarding Limbus Company. All because of his ridiculous requirements to function, and his overall unusability. He's supposed to be really strong when he does function though, right? Denial. Well, on paper he's actually really solid, at least in terms of passives and scaling. His S1 is supposed to lose clashes and lower his sanity, plays into his kit being minus coins and whatnot, but it also rolls impossibly low. Do LCB IDs even roll this low? When sane, this can roll for 0, even. At the very least, he's practically guaranteed to lose 3 sanity by using this. And even when negative, it's a base 6. Doesn't scale up either, so where's the potential? Ah, here we are. Puddle Stomp is S2. This is supposed to be his bread and butter, right? 4 coins of hitting at 15 if we meet some negative sanity conditionals. Should be real doable, yeah? Heck, we can even get a tremor burst and deal more damage by eating some sinking. There are conditionals we can fulfill, surely. Oh my. That S3 looks like it enables his entire kit. Heck, as long as we get that in our starting bucket of skills, we should be good, right? Yeah, his whole kit comes online. He can soak damage, be allowed to lose clashes. Heck, if his passive is going, that's 5 protection right there for the next turn. All that means is that by himself, if we can loop an S3 into an S1 or counter, we can puddle stomp for massive damage, right? Only it were that easy. This ID genuinely hates us. Even if we give it a good thing, it squanders it so fast. That once in a blue moon where he pops off. The potentiality of this ID, that's what matters, right? Besides, in MD, we can reach that ceiling so easily. Make him so ridiculously powerful. He's still good, yeah? Amazing ceiling, right? See? 4 coin negative skill. Damage conditionals. Heck, he does Rupture. That's meta these days, yeah? Oh, there's a newer Heathcliff that does Rupture. Well, this one does Sinking too. Can't refute that, right? The latest banner also dropped a Don who can do Sinking and Rupture while being a fluff ball. Well, you're just a meta slave using the newest units. Sunshower is good. Great even. Can your new Heathcliff do this? Can your new Don do this? Can they stomp puddles too? Huh? Not so talkative anymore, are you? Hey, why are you backing away? I've just finally convinced you that Sunshower is good, right? Right? Anger. Shit, he rolled zeros again. Basic corroding. Thought most IDs that minus coins had some kind of sanity protection mechanic. Wait, that's only Konya and Don? So this guy's an SP yo-yo on top of all the above? Well, he's still better than most 00 IDs, yeah? He can at least outperform, say, 7 Heathcliff, right? Oh, you're saying that all this time, 7 Heath was a core part of Rupture until before Heisho started showing up, huh? Well, it's not like he also rolls higher with more consistent clashing and some additional synergies that can be fully utilized by a dedicated team. Yeah, I'm sure I'm resorting to being oddly specific here, but you don't understand. No one understands Potential Man's upper ceiling. This guy can clear the latest content still. You don't need new IDs or status teams. You just need the man in the raincoat. He'll carry you through everything. Trust me on this. No one understands him better than I do, than anyone else does. Have you used him? Have you seen his bloody puddle stomping? Heck, look at how much damage he can output if you're willing to bench Konya to boost his final power. Do you not see that 16 power puddle stomp? He doesn't need status for coin power conditionals. Heck, he even inflicts paralysis and fragile. Do your modern IDs do that? Of course they don't. PM is too scared to let the new stuff roll more coins. They're all shackled to their coin power, their total amount of status application, damage per turn, all that shit. Burst damage? Nah. You haven't seen a fully powered up puddle stomp, have you? Don't you remember line 4 of Railway 4? That sun shower hurting you so hard, he became a priority target? Just listen here, you little shit. We can make the man potential again. He hasn't lost the title to anyone else yet. He is still the potential man. Potential or not, he doesn't need your labels to reach that level. He just does. See? He's a negative coin ID. Coin power only makes him weaker. Just give him some paralysis or lower his sanity. Do the math to fluid sack him before he corrodes. Fix his problems one by one, and eventually he starts shining just as bright as anyone else. He can outperform 00 IDs any day of the week if you just give him enough. Hell, let me tell you about how good binds is on him. You'll understand by then. Bargaining. If we give the man binds, he can be quite reliable now. Puddle Stomp is semi-AoE. He loses sanity on his own per turn. We can give him Linton Gregor too. Bloom damage on the Puddle Stomp. He'll always be the man with the lowest SP, so he'll always get the buff and even the sanity loss. Oh, what's that? We have mentioned Kodya, right? One final power just for having an appropriate amount of negative sanity. Blunt damage on turn for letting himself get hit. Hell, we can even give him Ishmael's Blind Obsession passive since he's going to take damage anyway. Look at all that. He's no longer just potential man, he's finally a man. Real strong man too. And all it took was sacrificing 3 other sinner slots and giving him ego buffs. Hell, we can even give him asymmetrical inertia. Look, we fixed his speed, he applies Tremor Burst on Puddle Stomp, so he now has even more fragile application. We just need someone else who can consistently apply the Tremor for him. You can trust me to cook, right? You've trusted me this far with these guides. Even if I've been telling you not to parrot them as gospel, But just this time, just this once, aren't you level with me here? We can return the potential to the man. He hasn't lost it yet. Just you wait. I'll prove it. Might take me a bit to show you how to build him, but look, we can use him as the Exodia for this build. Since he's our staple, we need people that can enable his passive. We need envy generation. We just need a way of syncing his SP and regaining it. Right, we need a few binds. We need gloom, lust, envy, pride. Of course, we can run a syncing team. Some of those even apply tremor too. See, we can field Hanafuda Ishmael for both syncing and tremor. That gives us access to blind obsession too. Holy shit, it's all coming together. Kodya and Linton are stuck riding the bench for support passives to soup up his capabilities, and we can even throw in the painter. Yes, Ring Sun can help us tremendously here. Doesn't matter if he's in front or in back, he can provide us resources or sanity yo-yo. Of course, we can also do the same with Butler Faust. On the field, she can fluid sack us. Off the field, she heals sanity against targets with sinking. As long as we can maintain the appropriate counts. We should be fine, of course. We can run Red Eyes and Penitence when we get those Envy Resonances. You remember when I spoke about that support passive a few videos back? Sinclair can be Enclair. He provides us blunt damage, exactly what we bloody need. How about that? Oh, and of course, we can run Butler Otis on the field. See, she generates all of the ego resources we need. And on top of that, provides echoes of the mana. Damn, it really all is coming together. See? As long as we read all of his kit and comprehend what he needs to do, we can make the man potential again. Oh, and you know, we even got a package we can drop in. We can drop in the Dishi package. I know Dishi Assault isn't that popular, but Dishi Hongers? Man's got a bloody Keyblade. He's like a whimsical Kingdom Hearts character. See? We've got a team that can meet his potential still. May not be perfect for him, but it's damn near close, isn't it? Right, Don doesn't have any amazing IDs to slot in, so if we could have gotten the new Heisho, she'd fit right in there. Perfectly Heisho-shaped hole to round out the composition. See? Even we can benefit from the modern stuff. Potential man always wins. We're always getting new tools for him, make him a relevant topic of conversation again. Look at all of that. Fastest build guide of my entire life, and it didn't start and end with insert all Heishos and call it a day. Creativity isn't dead. The ceiling is still infinite, and yet, depression. He still doesn't outcompete the best IDs at their baseline. Even when we accommodate for everything he is capable of, everything he can contribute to a team, he still falls behind. All that work to watch him roll zeros, just because negative coins are far more unpredictable than plus coins. He can't raise his ceiling much further. He can't be a star, just a B-grade actor. We've given him everything. Sanity management, a blunt team, tremor for his burst, enough resources for bind, asymmetrical inertia, and even blind obsession to capitalize off of. And yet, any one of his supporting actors could outperform him here. A different idea of his own could outperform him. Just look at the Wild Hunt-shaped elephant in the room. Sinking has its own god of IDs, and it's Heathcliff's own bad end ID. He even has minus coins, his own inbuilt sanity yo-yo, and of course an on-demand, huge scaling engine with Coffin. He just can't compete. He's too good. He's more potential than the potential man. He performs too much better. Clash is good, nukes targets for fun, synergizes to a crazy extent with everyone else here. Heck, he even has a horse. And horse girls have started outpacing fox girls in popularity these days. We're doomed on every single front possible. We've long lost this war. We didn't even lose it when the Heishos moved in. We lost it 2 seasons ago. It wasn't even close. You know, just leave me alone. It all looks too pitiful, doesn't it? Go on. Laugh at this 27-year-old who dared believe in a man's potentiality. Can't get any worse from here, right? Things can only go up once we've hit rock bottom. We've given him fire, glory, yet he still rolls zeros. As long as we roll something higher than 0, we can consider that a win, right? Acceptance. Fine. Doesn't matter anymore, does it? The Heishos have won. The new potential woman is in the building, and she actually has a real ceiling that doesn't require you to read between the lines. Power creep was inevitable. Better design was inevitable. IDs that have real synergy and pair together well have come and gone. And yet, Sunshower is still in the gutter. Washed up as he always has been. But that's okay. This series was never about building the hard meta. Leave that to people who do the full math and execute on high damage per round strategies. Leave it to the people who discovered how to free turn Lei Heng, the mad lads that get sub 30 on railway clears. We aren't the top 0.01% of players. We're just here for the love of the game. So, what use is there in hating the new shiny toys? Let me show you what I've actually cooked up here. What I've come to accept as a solid place to field Potential Man. One last time before this season is over. First off, not that much of his kit is actually centered around applying sinking. Instead, he's got Rupture on 3 out of 4 of his skills. To this end, we can sub him into a Rupture team. I bet he has 0 count, in which case we're going to need IDs that can either supply a lot of counts, or don't need a ridiculous amount to function. Here, he'll function as a potency stim and a count nuker. He's going to be eating real good, considering all the new stuff we've gotten recently, and also he's going to have one hell of a time maintaining his SP. To that end, let me welcome the most obvious package we're bringing along. Welcome to the Heisho packs. We're specifically taking Mao Shu, Mao Otis, and Wu Sang as a baseline. I'll offer up the others with some caveats afterwards. However, we'll cover the 2 Maos first. As long as Mao Shu clashes, we're getting a Rupture neutral to Rupture positive experience depending on her speed, as well as whether or not the target has Deathrite haste on them. Since she's Roshu, she'll also be offering us 4 Kalgya, which will be very relevant later on, once we start introducing some of our other on-field units. As for Mao Otis, she offers much the same. Only exchange the clashing conditional for an unopposed one instead. In terms of egos, she offers us Ebony Stem. This thing allows her to go exceedingly positive on counts with all of her skills, so long as we meet her usual conditional. Regardless, as another spot of Deathrite haste and consistent count application, we can solve a lot of our issues too in regards to Rupture as a status. Next up is Wu Sang. This fella gives us another really fast unit, that while isn't the most Rupture positive, he does offer us a way of popping Deathrite haste and more importantly, apply any amount of Tremor. Since he'll be far faster than Sunshower Heathcliff, he'll practically guarantee that Heathcliff will have some Tremor to pop on his Puddle Stomp. As a reminder, we're aiming to make use of asymmetrical inertia, plus anytime a Tremor burst occurs, we are getting free damage in the form of more Fragile. This is an exceedingly potent effect that we can exploit for magnifying damage on our other units. Regardless, Potential Man benefits greatly from Wu Sang's existence, but to make Wu Sang a bit less of a wet noodle, we're going to need some further support. Let's introduce the 2 royals. We're of course bringing Lord Hongers and Shichun Ish. Both of these are going to be lending quite a bit of support to our current selection of units. First off, Lord Hongers is almost an auto-include when it comes to Heishos, being able to supplement their capabilities quite well alongside his own. He offers exceedingly premium Rupture support, as well as allowing all of the other Heishos the ability to either assist attack with an S1 or S3. Anyone he tag teams with is accelerating our game plan along. Notably, of the 3 Heishos outlined above, Otis can provide a count on an unopposed, and Yisung can get us some Tremor Burst without Fragile application. Roshu is our least useful rotation in this particular case, since she needs to clash to get the most out of her skill set. Plus, when determining deployment order, prioritize Yisung and Otis over Roshu. Aside from that, our man provides us a single Pride source as well as plenty of Gloom to make use of. While his 4-coin skill is more likely to eat count faster than even Heathcliff can get around to, it does scale quite well in this particular composition. With those all outlined, he also benefits from negative effects on target quite significantly. Since Potential Man applies so many of them, we can make solid use of him to fix quite a few debuffs on the opponents. As for Shichun-ish, he receives a bunch of buffs from Wu Sang, including additional poise generation and attack power. Once he uses his empowered S3, she also follows up with her S3 as well, for a combination attack. Likewise with Lord Hongers, he also benefits from negative effects stacked up on targets, further pushing the usefulness of Sunshower's debuff package. Next, we're making the Force choice. You can either Malforce for hard meta, or 7 Force if you just want her ego resources. Envy, Gloom, and Lust are all things that we stand to benefit from if we wish to activate any of Sunshower's egos. Specifically Binds. Also of note is needing at least 3 Envy and 5 Gloom, fully turn him online, with Gregor and Kodya's support passives, as well as his own passive. All of these can be turned on significantly faster if we're aiming to make use of his damage more often. On the other hand, Malforce provides a ridiculous amount of damage and utility with assist defense and her kit. Malforce's advantages lie in being able to generate us both Sloth and Pride, fueling asymmetrical inertia faster and giving us quicker access to the fragile engine provided by it. While she doesn't offer us any Gloom or Envy, there is arguably already enough of either to go around. All of those advantages, it's hard not to just slot her in and call it a day, I'll be honest. I practically convinced myself that she's a must-have in this kind of composition. Heck, instead of needing to painfully fuel Fluid Sac, we could even swap around to command Meltdown, if it's available. We don't always need to top up Heathcliff's sanity that much, just enough to prevent him from corroding. With the ability to practically fund this ego by herself, it's amazing to have access to. That being said, Fluid Sac is still an amazing option for bailing Heathcliff out of more dire sanity issues, and of course, potentially providing him with further protection should his HP drop to such drastic levels that it needs a recharge. He could be getting 7 protection, so long as at least one Fluid Sac hits the field. Whichever you have access to will do perfectly fine anyhow. All of that aside, the assist defense will be one of our best friends when it comes to Heathcliff. Instead of always forcing him to clash and fuss yo-yo his SP back upwards if he's too successful, Faust can take the clash for him. This lets him fully take the SP loss from passives while also attacking with impunity. He doesn't get any benefits from winning clashes, thus we can instead utilize the assist defense to puddle stomp. That, or enable Otis to go unopposed. With Lord Hongers, we can also provide Lord's Guards too, opening another opportunity for Heathcliff to go unopposed and keep the SP ticking downwards. With everyone we're fielding out of the way, let's talk about supports that are so vital to potential men. Rather than filling the remaining slots with Heisha and calling it a day, we're going to focus on either our debuffs or enabling mechanism. First off, we can go with Dead Rabbit's boss Mussault. This fella actually works to enable Shichun-ish. As long as we can free Gluttony Res, which is very easy on this team, we can lower our offense level with any of our significantly faster IDs. We can first enable the part of her passive that stims Rupture potency and counts by lowering the difference in offense level that we need to overcome. He has no real value when he hits the field, so place him close to the end of deployment, or not at all. From there, we want to look at Sinclair. If we had any RAF access at all, this would be Enclair. Real easy pick. Unfortunately, we're going to have to look elsewhere, due to not having any aside from Potential Man's counter. Having to counter 6 turns in an encounter is an extraordinary amount of pain and commitment. In longer contents like MD or Railway, it'd practically be best in slots. But here, not so much. Our next best bet's maybe Davet Sinclair. This fellow lets us rack up some defense level down. Functionally, free defense down is practically a fragile, anyhow. If he ever hits the field, he's going to be real slow to build up though. If we decide to use him, it may be better to have him start on the field, then cycle out after a few turns to let Shi-Chun come in, with Launcher instead. Regardless, Davat offers us some flexibility in how we go about our play patterns, so he'll be our pick for this composition. While an argument can be made for the Heisha, he sucks at riding the bench, but instead does contribute quite nicely if he ever hits the field. I'll be saving him for another time though. I quite like how the Roosters interact, but we'll see them down the line. First we come to Don. Let's curveball in BL Don. BL Don offers us ramp for the 2 Royals, offering us some additional poise generation while off the field. The extra poise potency comes as a nice to have. It'll speed up Shi-Chun's build up significantly, since she's likelier to be the one falling behind. For the very affordable free Pride resources, we can stretch our poise gain just a little bit further. We'll probably never hit the field. Heck, we can just choose not to add her to deployment order alongside the Dead Rabbit. Our 2 remaining options are here strictly to enable Potential Man, Podya and Linton Gregor. Podya provides final power up if we have less than 15 SP, and additional damage if we have less than 30. This is a huge stim to all of Heathcliff's skills. Everything goes up by 1, and each coin functionally gets +1 to its value, multiplying the strength of this particular passive by the number of coins. Since he has at least 3 coins on all of his main skills, this is going to be stretched real far. Heck, his counter has 2 coins even. While to some it'd seem like heresy to let her ride the bench, there really is no better choice here for Potential Man specifically. There's no real need to deploy her here either. Just get in the way of any retreat order shenanigans we'd get to pull off. As for Linton Gregor, this guy gives us a permanent -5 SP per turn on Heathcliff. Even when he doesn't have any sinking to his name, he at least has Gregor to back him. This -5 helps us consistently reduce his SP to keep his minus coins rolling well. The added Gloom damage also helps us out, albeit is mostly a nice added bonus on top of his Puddle Stomp, or Binds, rather than a major increase in damage. Regardless, the small wins we can get amass here. They will all count for something. With everyone cleared out of the way, we can discuss play pattern. Due to the nature of this team, there's actually quite a lot of play patterns to be concerned with. First to consider is deployment order. To make full use of everyone's capabilities, we're going to want to be able to cleanly rotate units on and off the field as required. Although there are only so many units we want to bring as backup in order to consistently keep the rotation going. Aside from that, Horrors picks which Heisho to deploy for his S3 based on deployment order. so this is going to be a rather delicate balancing act to get things right for the bonuses we're after for Bolus Contamination. Otis has the most important, so she'll be first, Yi-Sung is the next most important, plus going second, and the rest are interchangeable or just nice to have. Plus in order, I'd more or less propose 1. Sunshower Heathcliff, our potential man. 2. Either Davat Sinclair or Shichun Ish. 3. Lord Hongers. 4. Mao Otis. 5. Wu Sang. 6. Mao Ryoshu. And 7. Mao Force. Of course, number 8 is either going to be Davat Sinclair or Shichun Ish, depending on which we picked for number 2. This allows Heathcliff to catch up with additional slots as required, else otherwise benefits from any relevant passives to deployment order. With the additional slots, Sinclair can ramp up significantly faster before leaving, to allow Ishmael to arrive and use her launcher skill. After all, by turn 4, Sinclair can retreat and allow Ishmael to instead take the spotlight with added poise. Lord Hongers can abuse the above lineup to make him more rupture positive and not burn through quite as much count, since using an S3 will immediately get Otis's benefit up and running. From there, the buffs he receives are more nice to haves rather than strictly mandatory. Getting an additional Tremor Burst won't give us more Fragile, as Broken Bell only applies 1 Fragile per turn. However, for the turns where Yi-Sung doesn't have Tremor Burst lined up, he'll be able to maintain the Fragile application as required. The other 2 are more so icing on top. Past initial deployment and slots, we have a few very specific goals in mind. First is to fire up the Sunshower engine. The most ideal way is to use his S3 on turn 1. While not essential enough to warrant a reset to get this, it does make life significantly easier to get those sinking stacks up front. If that hurdle can't be cleared instantly, we should then look to see if we can get asymmetrical inertia up and running. Since it costs 25 SP, we can instead use it to tank his SP down when activated and reach lower SP levels that way on turn 2. Failing both of those, we're instead looking to get the rest of his engines online. That being to get at least 5 Gloom and /or 3 Envy if possible. If Shichun Ish is in the back, this won't be immediately possible for Envy. Gloom will take 2 turns regardless. If we manage to, across the 2 turns, get the aforementioned resources, all 3 engines powering Potential Man through passives will be running. These up his usability dramatically. From there, we're looking for the resources to pop asymmetrical inertia to get the Fragile engine going. We can either strategically use it to nuke down his sanity, or we can bide our time before using it to get the most out of it when there's a larger sloth resin for clock winding. The latter requires Malforce and Wu Sang to cooperate and fuss offer us their S1s for the resin. Following up the Potential Man engine, we can look to the last piece of the puzzle, that being Binds. On a turn with his S2 in the upper or upcoming slots, we're going to want to use Bind. It doesn't cost too much SP up front, but do remember to add 10 SP to his per turn loss for calculations over the next 3 turns. If Gregor's passive is still online after using Binds, that's 15 SP loss without accounting for Heathcliff's own sinking count. Keep the cost in mind and perhaps preemptively slot in a sanity heal in the form of Fluid Sac, Blind Obsession or Command Meltdown. Even Rep Emitter may do the trick, stop him short of corroding. Anyhow, with the leeway of SP allowing, we can then queue up a very powerful Puddle Stomp. We can expect it to be powered by 5 final power from the skill itself, 1 Gloom damage up from Gregor, a 20% increase on final coin if we have at least 5 sinking, 1 final power from Kodya as well as 15% more damage, 2 final power from Binds, AoE damage from Before the King and Binds, Fragile from a Tremor Burst from Yi-Sung, and any amount of defense down from the Bloody Rupture passive. Oh, of course, any amount of offense level we would gain from utilizing Bind's passive too. All of that to say, if the stars align a real specific way, the Puddle Stomper can and will still wreck absolute shop. Alright, and it'll proc Rupture 4 times as we're in Rupture. Short of a few sanity manipulation tricks and internal sinking counting, that about sums up how we'd utilize the man here. He exists to support and add negative effects, otherwise he exists for an ungodly nuke upon all that is holy. Potential Man. Mr. Sunshower Heathcliff is nothing short of ridiculous in what ways he can scale, and almost none of it is described in his own kit at all. He is the very definition of trying to get an Exodia up and running, but without an appropriate draw engine or reliable mill/brainstorm. Once you see what he's capable of though, it is nothing short of sheer insanity. How he even manages to still exist here is beyond me. Regardless, the rest of the team just needs to play their own minigames to throttle up. Hongers needs to get his S freeze, we can toss in a Tears of Tarnished Blood if we have the resources to spare too. All the Maos need only fulfill their speed and clashing related conditionals to keep the rupture count healthy. Wu Sang is quite self-sufficient and also likewise real fast. He can give concussion to amp up the damage accordingly. As for Ish, she reaches her potential far more easily if we have her stay in the back first. Gaining the head start of 5 poise and 2 counts is quite massive when ramping her up. Past there, with enough resources, we can throw out a few rather interesting egos. Of consideration past all of the aforementioned ones are Otis's Ebony Stem, that sweet Rupture Count bonus, either of the Lassos for Rupture Potency Stimming, and for Luxury Poise Generation, Ryoshu's for Calgia. All of those are nice luxuries that we have access to that allow us some additional power when fueling up our other ID's game plans. An odd final note for a potential man is the Holiday Ego. Very cheap to fund, and gives us a weird bit of ramp as long as we meet a real specific conditional on our enemies. So long as they have a positive effect, we can amp up our sinking gain and main status outputs. Very unusual passive to have, but as most bosses have some kind of buff they can apply to themselves, it may be a rather welcome one to make use of. All that to say, Potential Man is still quite strong when fed his dues. Puddle Stomper may have needed to find a new home, but it's not like he's completely irrelevant yet. Go give some of your old IDs a dusting off sometime. Potential Man isn't the only one that could use a little time in the spotlights. He's definitely still one of the more misunderstood ones. Alrighty. Young Office Ishmael is the single stupidest ID I've ever seen. The typical literacy level of a Project Moon fan, posit this ID is a hard skip. However, for the clinically insane like myself, with a background in dealing table games at a casino, this ID is genius. It is legitimately a skill-based ID in the same way that Hanafuda, Blackjack, or Poker is. And the difference in skill is potentially massive. Are the returns on her kit quite as insane? Well, kinda. Rather complicated. But damn, is she satisfying to use once you've learned a few basic tricks. First off, she's inspired by the Zhong Office General Reception from Ruina, featuring Hanafuda and her Zhong Office fixers raining from J-Corp. They look over games of chance and hold people to their contractual obligations. They also watch out for cheating and foul play, dealing out punishments to those that infringe upon the rules of the game or try to break their commitments. If anything, this is pretty close to a casino supervisor. Shout out to my old trainer Jeremy and Vincent, those two are bloody legends. In Ruina, her kit was functionally a side grade to Olga. Discard combat pages to get benefits, make big and risky plays to eventually get a massive payoff. Some of that does indeed transfer over to this WoW PPID, with some very glaring caveats and horrifying extras. A cursory glance at her kit shows some pretty vanilla stuff. Tsurugiri, a 12-roller 2-coin S1 with coin power conditionals, high status count numbers, and on-use discard. Compared to Olga and many other discard IDs, however, the discard's conditional isn't the skill of the lowest rank, but a skill that differs to the one used. Tsusuki Misdirection. The S2 is a 16-roller 3-coin affair, with the same coin power and discard conditionals, but instead acts as a potency boost rather than counts, with an odd SP heal. Sakura-sen, the S3, however, is a 17-roller 3-coin affair, with the same coin power and discard conditionals, albeit allowing the coin power to stack up to 3 instead of 2. It also does additional damage equal to bright potency, and amplitude conversion. Horrifyingly, it also amps status counts by 3 each, and potencies by 3 each as well. If there is no amplitude conversion, it will inflict Tremor Decay, which reduces defense level for every 4 potency of Tremor. Kozan. The S3-2 is an unclashable coin reuse skill that procs based on Bright, rolling up to 5 coins with a whole bunch of bonuses based on Bright potency. Our goal is to trigger this skill as many times as possible to dumpster a shit ton of sinking and tremor count alongside a stupid amount of damage. Lastly, Shuffle Hand is her clashable counter. It discards 2 skills of the lowest rank across all her skill slots and interacts with her passive in a mildly jank way that we'll cover later. Anyhow, that's the simple stuff. Let's talk about Ishmael's minigame that's been thrown into her passive. Hoi Koi. This is usually to say check or proceed while playing Hanafuda. How necessary it was to design her kit around this? Well, no, not really, but it's a game that's below the complexity of Blackjack, closer to Hanafuda, but thankfully lower than that too. Simply put, we are trying to increase a buff on her called Bright. Bright starts at 0 potency and 3 count at the start of turn and resets this when she no longer has Bright. Bright increases in a variety of interactions, but most notably the count goes down by 1 at the start of every turn, meaning it is functionally removed and reset every 4 turns due to being able to exist at 0 counts and any number of potency up to 5. For every Bright potency, Ishmael gains an offense level. The next part of Koi Koi is the troublesome parts. If Ishmael doesn't have a suit buff, she'll gain one at the start of turn. These can be one of 3 suits. The one she receives on the first turn of combat will always correspond to a base attack skill she has in her leftmost skill slot. The first is Pine Crane suits, giving her S1 plus 2 base power and allowing Raph skills to interact with the third part of her passive. Second is Suzuki Grass suits, giving her S2 plus 1 base power and allowing Sloth skills to interact with the third part of her passive. And last is Blue Sakura suits, giving her S3 plus 1 base power and allowing Gloom skills to interact with the third part of her passive. On combat start, regardless of which skill was used in the leftmost slots, the suit buff will be changed to its Sin affinity on the next turn. So if the S1 was used, the next turn's suits will be Pine Crane, S2 will result in Suzuki Grass, and if an Ego is used of any of the three aforementioned Sins, it will change to the related suits as well. Past that, if the skill used was Sakura Sen, or S3, or an Ego skill, it'll give +1 Bright Potency. Essentially in this regard, her S3 and Ego skills are wildcards / jokers. Now, if you use a skill that matches the Sin affinity of the suits Ishmael is currently affected by, you gain +1 more Bright Potency. If this is a successive turn in a row that you have matched the suits, you get another +1 Potency. On hits, you'll also trigger a Tremor Burst for 1 Tremor count, and have a 25% chance to gain an Ego resource corresponding to that skill's affinity. In addition, when the skill ends, if you have 5 Bright Potency or 0 Bright counts, you trigger Korzan for S3-2. After all of that bullshit, her Ego resource passive is quite simple. On Tails hits, heal 5 SP, once per turn, and deal plus 10% damage against targets in low morale or panic states. All of the above is about as much as a majority of PM content creators are willing to look into, after which they'll give the summary of either Skipper and focus on Gregor, which is Unga and hope that 3 skills can be used in a row to bunga out her S3 too. However, I'm a casino dealer, and I've played these games before. Dealt them in high stakes tables, and her kit has hooked me on effective play patterns and optimizations. How the fuck do you use her effectively? Well, you see, that's an entire extra page of theory and rigorous understanding of Limbus before you get there, so let's dive in head first. First off, your starting pattern matters a lot. It informs of the potential for different routes and whether or not you will be bricked and are more likely to choke. Easily the best pattern to run into is 3 S1s. Guarantees that you have the Pine Crane suit, plus buffing her S1s. That, and you won't be discarding any of them when used. By turn 3, you'll trigger Korzan and it'll be bright and happy days. No ego needed, no deck manipulation, just remember to slot S1 into a leftmost slot. Okay, but what if you start with S2 and Suzuki Grass? Well, you can S2 to get Koi Koi started, maybe S2 again if you started with 2 S2s or had an upcoming S2. What now? On turn 3, you have 3 potency, no S2s left to trigger Korzan, and your hand looks like a mess. Depending on what's in your hand, you have a few routes open to you. With 2 S1s in your hand, you could use an S1, which converts next turn's suits to Pine Crane. Use an S1 again next turn for a 4-hit Korzan. Not ideal. Use an Ego skill. Your best bet here, to be honest. Christmas Nightmare is pretty insane on this ID. The passive is also really nice on a Tremor team. Or you can hit that counter button, so what does the counter do? Well, the counter discards the other slot and changes the suit to one of the other 2 that isn't the current one, and has a 50-50 shot of granting you Bright Potency at combat start. You have a chance to hit either Pine Crane or Blue Sakura, a 50-50 shot. With 2 S1s in hand, if the upcoming skill is also an S1, this may be your best case scenario without Ego. It also means you've discarded an S3 on a prior turn to get here. If the upcoming, however, is an S3, and you've discarded an S2 on a prior turn, the number of remaining S1s in the bucket of 6 skills is 0. In fact, the upcoming skills will be the S3 in the bucket and a skill from the next bucket of 6. If this next skill after that is an S2, a sloth skill, you've potentially bricked your hand. The counter flips a coin for Raph or Gloom, and if it lands Raph, you don't have a Raph skill to use besides bailing out with Ego. You'll Korzan on 3 to 4 brights, which is kinda just sad. That being said, this compounds further if you've discarded 2 skills leading up to this point, in which I would recommend you just Ego or bust, as the next 2 skills are from the next buckets, and the problems only escalate from there. Sure, you can see what the upcoming skill from that bucket is, but the 1 in 5 from the others is nightmarish to figure. If the upcoming is a sloth, you have a 1 in 5 of a total brick, since you are trying to get away from Suzuki Grass. If the upcoming is a Raph or Gloom, 2 in 5 could be sloth, and depending on what suit you coin flip to, that could be a brick too, as when you hit the off suit compared to the upcoming, you'll be bricked. Best case scenario, however, is if you get an S1 and S3, you'll get a Kolzan at 4 for the Pine Crane and Kolzan at 5 for Blue Sakura. Now, the odds of that best case aren't amazing. There's a 60% chance if the upcoming skill is an S3. 20% chance if the upcoming skill is an S1. If you make either of those, then you secure your 5-coin Kolzan. On the other hand, you could just roll into double Sloth and Brick, or double Wrath and get Blue Sakura, and need an Ego to bail you out. Speaking of Egos, all Egos can bail you out for 2 to 3 Bright depending on the timing of their use. If you had successfully triggered the passive last turn, then Ego with the corresponding Sin Affinity will get 3 Bright. This allows you to do the 2-turn 5-coin Kolzan if you start in Blue Sakura, since you would be gaining 2 potency from using S3 with the correct suit, followed by 3 potency by egoing with the correct suit in a successive turn, triggering the passive. Functionally, this lets you Kolzan on turn 2, provided you've got the ego resources for Snag Harpoon, Death Maggot, or Bygone Days, all of which can quite easily be fueled if the rest of your team is built around it. Anyhow, the above is the basics. Yes, the fucking basics. Why? Because there's a few horrifying complications with this whole affair. 1. When you ego, you don't discard the skill in the opposite slot. This can hugely throw off your bright stacking and deck counting, leading to either an ego death spiral or the need to reset her suits with the counter. 2. Post Kolzan, she randomizes which suits, which has a 1 in 3 chance to brick your hand if both skills next turn are different, or a 2 in 3 to brick your hand if both skills are the same. 3. Depending on discard patterns, you may be stuck between 2 different buckets of skills. If the suit resets due to Kolzan, or if egos were used, or even a counter was used, you are in for the ego death spiral, or a counter to prey on the resets. 4. Kolzan refunds bright potency that doesn't get converted into coins used, making the exact bright potency to play around very different depending on the content. You may only need to build a single potency to trigger Kolzan again if only 1 coin was used, in which case an ego or single match does it. Otherwise, it could be anything from 1 to 4, and the math gets increasingly fucked. To bail yourself out of these annoying scenarios, you can of course just use a skill that isn't on suit. That way you discard something troublesome, have a suit you can possibly work with, etc. But this results in an annoyingly dead turn, and also doesn't stack up your brights unless you use their S3. There's also considerations based on the upcoming skill, increasing the potential to brick. Plus, after using the first Kolzan, you're looking for patterns to consistently Kolzan again and again. Consistency decreases dramatically, and her reliability goes down in longer fights. Good thing, almost everything is a short fight these days outside of story content and really high MD floors. Anyhow, I've set up a bit of an analog simulator, since getting examples in-game kinda sucks. Red cards are S1s, black cards are S2s, jokers are S3s. Flipping a card upside down is either being used as an ego or counter as specified. The green chips are our bright potency, the Warhammer coins are our bright count. The red chip is Pine Crane, the yellow chip is Suzuki Grass, the blue chip is Blue Sakura. We've also got a D6 here for how many Kolzan coins are used. The 6 is a reroll. This is to represent the number of bright potency that may be returned should the coins not be used. Last but not least, this part is going to be entirely unscripted, so if I make any mistakes or whatnot, is what it is. Thanks for watching, the rest is just me playing with cards and theoreticals. Alright, let's start this out then. So once again, any blacks are S2s, reds S1s, and jokers are S3s. We have 2 different buckets. So this is the first skill bucket over here, and this is the second skill bucket using a different set of cards as well. So we can tell if a second skill bucket is being mixed in with the first one. This is censorship, don't worry about this very much. Aside from that, in the recording I mentioned there would be a yellow chip. Unfortunately, I've only got white. So this will be representative of Suzuki Grass. Anyhow, start off, I'll give these a generous shuffle to see what our starting is. Do the same for the second pile as well. Okay. After that, we'll roll a d6 to figure out what suit we start in. Actually, no. We'll need to draw our skills first. So these would be, let's say, slot 1 is an S3, slot 2 is an S1, and The upcoming is an S2. Okay, this is a very messy pattern to start already. Roll a dice to see which suit buff they would give us out of these two here, so the S3 and the S1. Let's say that would be the S3 then, so starting Gloom. Gloom is pretty annoying. We have free count still as well. These 3 coins here. So what can we do here? An S2 isn't the most optimal play because if we S2, there is no guarantee of getting another S2, simply because there are 2 more S1s potentially in this pile over here, which could filter in. So we've got a 1 in 3 chance of succeeding, and the rest is just bricking immediately. Here, ideally, we would want to go ahead and slot in our S3. Once we've slotted in our S3, let's see here. S3 gets used, S1 gets discarded. Off that, we gain 2 because it's an S3. We lose 1 count. Skill drops into the slots. The other skill that drops in is an S2. Okay, we have bricked ourselves almost immediately. And the upcoming skill is a red. Okay, in this particular scenario, if we had the ego resources, we would trigger ego. And we would instantly get our 5 stack pulls on. Just open the trigger. So this would only use up the ego. These 2 slots would fill in. Third slot would go. We'd get free. Let's see. We'll roll a dice to see how much of Pulzon we burn. We burn 3 coins from Pulzon, leaving us with 2 left. And we're back up to 3 counts, 2 potency. After using Pulzon, we then randomize the suits. 1, 2 is Wrath, 3, 4 is Sloth, and 5, 6 is Bloom. We are Wrath. Okay. So we have 2 potency there. We successfully Koi-Koi'd the previous turn. We have a red and an upcoming red. The easiest play here is to play red. This gives us 2. For matching, discard 1. This comes down. Second bucket comes into play. Shuffle this real quick again because I just flipped it over. Okay. First one is another Wrath skill. Second one is another Wrath skill. This is almost perfect in this particular case. Now, for simplicity's sake, let's go ahead and use another. We'll take a counterweight. We will use another Wrath skill. This will shuffle back into the other bucket. These 2 will come down as they are still Wrath skills. This will go through. We get an upcoming Sloth. Pulzon triggers. Pulzon only uses 1 coin, giving us 4 bright remaining again. We then roll to see what suit we land in. We land in Wrath. Okay, this is maybe way too good of a run, all things considered. Because we've only used 1, we still got 4. We're back at 3 potency again. We then go ahead and use another Wrath skill. Going down, we get our bright. We get our bright. We instantly trigger Pulzon again. This time is a reroll, still a reroll. We go through 3 coins, so we're down to 2. We roll again to randomize. That is a Sloth one this time. Okay. We are still back at 3 potency again. You can see the general flow at this point, yes? Okay, seeing the new setup we've got. Sloth, upcoming Sloth, a Wrath. We want to use our S2 since we are in Suzuki Grass. We use our S2. That discards the S1 as well. Since we had previously Koi-Koi'd, we get 2. This goes down. 1 and 1. Okay, what can we do here? Well, easy. We use the S2 again. Potency drops by 1, or the count drops by 1. We use the S2, it discards the S1 as well. New bucket fills up. From the next bucket, we roll for Kozan, it only uses 2. So we still have 3. We have 3. Now we roll for Watsu. It is Wrath. Okay, so here's where things get a little bit more complicated now. Because we now have Wrath just sitting there, and we only have 3 potency here. We don't have any Wrath skills. We do have Sakura Sen though. But if we wanted, we could go ahead and get 1 more bright potency off of this and not trigger Kozan yet. We could Ego, say Capote, for example. And that would instantly trigger Kozan due to Koi Koi. Unfortunately, since we are not matching, even if we use Sakura Sen, it won't help too much. So we could use a counter. What would the counter do? The counter would then pick between either, pick between either blue or yellow. And unfortunately, that's not in our upcoming, so our best option here really is to Ego, or to just take the fall and only get 4 out of it. In this case, we'll just take the fall. We use Sakura Sen. That gives us 1. It changes us over to blue. These come down. This comes down. This gets discarded with Sakura Sen. Our next one is yellow and a red. So this is like shitty scenario now, because now we're at 2 counts, 4 potency, and no good way of raising the potency. Here we can bail ourselves out in a couple of ways. We can flip the counter. Now for this example, let's flip the counter. On a 4-up, we get 1 extra bright and trigger Kozan immediately. If not, we fail. We fail to get a bright, so we do not trigger Kozan. This also discards the S2. So now we have more problems instead. Because now we are seeking between Wrath or Sloth. 1 to 3 is Wrath, 4 to 6 is Sloth. We got Wrath. Okay, we may have a chance to trigger. Count goes down by 1. New skill slots. Okay, we have a very damaging choice we can make here. We don't need to use we don't need to use the Wrath skill anymore. We can just use Sakura Sen and get an S3 right into the S3 too. So we can go ahead and do that. That kills this one. This kills this one. This one comes down. We get Kozan going off. Reroll. Only 2 potency gets used, so we still have 3. This first set of skills needs to get shuffled in again. Comes down as an S2, S1. Okay, and since we've already triggered Kozan resets it to Wrath again. Okay, not bad. This is more workable than you'd expect, basically. So then we would trigger Wrath. That gives us 2 potency due to... Let's see. No, it would only give us 1. We didn't manage to Koi Koi previously, so it would only give us 1. Which is a bit awkward, since now we're only at 2 counts, going down. This comes down. Trigger, trigger. We are still in Wrath, so we can play it 1 more time. Wrath kills the S2 as well. We go up to Kozan. Roll, only 1 is used. Game. 2 more skills are drawn. And our suit is, let's see, Suzuki Grass. Count goes back up. Alright. Here we don't have either of the ones we need. For Suzuki Grass, we just have 2 reds. We need a yellow. The upcoming is, however, the upcoming is an S3, which does allow us to trigger it right away, regardless of what happens. Here, you'd probably ego, or you can hit the counter. If you hit the counter, discards you, discards you. We roll the dice to see 4 up. We get the bright and we trigger it right away. Nope, we do not get the bright. We do not trigger it right away. We roll the 50-50 to see what suit we end up with. We end up with Wrath after all of that. So these would shuffle in. We end up with Wrath, and we have effectively bricked ourselves. Not necessarily, actually. No, we have an S3 in here. And then the upcoming is another S2. Okay. From there, because we don't have a good way of triggering it otherwise, S3. Discards, drops in, blah, blah. Pulls on. Still failing. Please roll 2. Okay. So calls on for 2, randomizes suit to blue. Alrighty. So we have 3 potency, 3 count, blue. We've got blue still in here. We can just use the blue right away. That kills these 2 off. That comes through. Red, red, 2. Calls on. The roll for how many coins got used off of Corzan. 2 coins got used off of Corzan. We still have 3 potency. Roll for which one we get. We need 1 or 2. If not, then this may be screwed. We got a 6 off screen. So that goes straight back to blue. We have 3 potency, blue. And we have 3 red cards in hand. That is a full brick now. Ideally from here we can try and hit a counter. Or we can snag Harpoon. Snag Harpoon is probably better, so we snag Harpoon. Bam. Ego. Matching. Pulls on for 2. Back down to 3. Roll for suits. We are in blue once again, so this is screaming because now 2 reds have come down. And we've got an S2 coming up. Okay, we've arrived in the Ego Death Spiral. What do? We snag Harpoon again. Why is this not the greatest idea ever? Well, gotta say, we're burning through Ego resources and sanity, as well as not refreshing the deck quite as fast as we'd like to. 2, Koi Koi, matching, and Ego, so it'd logically be 3, but maxes out at 5. Calls on, we roll for only 1 this time. Therefore, we have 4 potency remaining. Okay, roll again for the suits. We are still in blue. Do we have anything to trigger blue? No, we do not. Therefore, Ego Death Spiral. Here we go. Ego Death Spiral. We get our calls on trigger. That is all 5 of them being used this time. Okay, good. All 5 bright potency gets used, and we are sitting in white this time. So in this case, yellow. We have an S2 and an S3. We could use the S2 immediately. We still have 3 counts, therefore we have some mistake allowance. Therefore we can use the S2. Let's see, we did Snag Harpoon, it's fast getting Koi Koi previous turn. This means we get 2 potency this time. This shifts down, skill, and skill. Okay, perfect combination in this case. This is what happens when you have achieved Koi Koi and then are doing the 2s2s, potentially, in this case. Or rather, refreshing from a new bucket. Yeah, refreshing from a new bucket. Things have gotten a bit messy though. I am pretty sure some of these discard piles have already messed up, and this might not be supposed to be here at all, if anything. No, this one's the one that's not really supposed to be here. Anyway, in this particular scenario, matching, Koi Koi. There we go. Into the buckets. Comes down. We go 1 and 2. And now you do it one more time after having already burnt through 2 turns worth. It's the same one, so it doesn't get discarded. Koi Koi goes on for 1. Roll. And we get white, the yellow once again. Anyhow, you get the idea. This ID is a mess, and you're playing a miniature version of Hanafuda against yourself. Honestly, just do what everyone else says. Play match free. Don't put yourself through this. Don't put yourself through the extra math. You're not earning any money from this. You're only earning damage.